Hello everybody. Welcome to another Pixo stream. My name is IRR Sculpts, aka Ian. How you guys doing? We're gonna do some fun. We're gonna be doing some fun 3D key slicing today, but let the room kind of fill in. What's up, Kamara Snickles? How's everybody doing? Looking for my glove. There we go. Yay! What's up, man? Hello. All right, everybody. So really quickly, just wanted to say real fast, please, especially if you're watching this after I'm live, please make sure to subscribe, follow, and to Pixo's channel. Also check out their website, Pixologic.com, because they have ZBrush Core Mini for free. And I'm wanting you guys to know that next week I'm going to be doing some ZBrush Core Mini sculpts that you guys can follow along with. So if you're interested in that, we'll be using ZBrush Core Mini for making statues for 3D printing. So that's going to be next week. But today we're going to go over keying. So make sure to follow, subscribe, check them out, because also too, there's just a ton of artists that are here that will help anybody from games, film, toys, etc., etc. We're all here. What is up? Hello, Robo. What's up, Stu? How you doing? Ryan, what's happening, dude? It's going, man. It is going. So, last week, my internet was really shoddy, unfortunately, and everything was cutting out. So, last week, this is where we got, and I felt like things were in and out. So, what we're going to be doing today is going over how to create keys and how to cut within ZBrush. And then I'm going to go ahead and start cutting this guy up and kind of showing you what I did before my stream got cut off. So we'll be doing that, but instead of just, cutting this model, what I'm going to do is actually bring up a cube, and I'm going to show you how I cut cubes, spheres, what you could do with live booleans, etc., etc. So if you guys have questions for that, that's what we're going to be doing today. Then I'll come back in and cut this model up. So let's go ahead and start with the cylinder. Yeah, nice. Good. Get some water. Okay. And let me actually just pull up a different material. So this is your basic cylinder. We'll go ahead and make Polymesh 3D. And so I'm going to go over how I make a key, or how I would make custom keys for 3D print. There's a few ways you can do it, and I'll go over a couple ways that I know that I think is consistent. So the first thing we're going to do is insert a plane 3D. Let's solo that out for a second. So this is your basic plane 3D. This is what I use mainly to create keys for ZBrush, and I use dynamic subdivisions to kind of help me see that a lot. So what we're going to do is go to geometry, and we're going to reconstruct subdivision a few times, which if you guys look up here real quick, right under geometry, every time you hit reconstruct subdivision, a new subdivision gets made. And that's important to note, because then you can actually go through and keep those subdivisions if you would like. You don't have to delete them. But for what we're going to do, we're going to delete the higher. All right, perfect. Now we're going to use ZModeler for most of everything when creating the keys. We'll turn on symmetry, and what I'm going to do is actually select this little group right here. So maybe like the middle 4 and then the ones around it. Actually, let's take that one off. Let's just do this. Here we go. And we're going to hover over our face, hold spacebar. It's going to bring up our options. I like to use extrude and then polygroup all. And we're going to go ahead and actually just kind of drag this out. And remember too, if you hit Alt, you'll actually be changing polygroups on the fly. So if you get something similar, you can switch that out. Something like that. And now we're going to do is actually highlight. We're going to mask off, not highlight, sorry. We're going to mask off this top part right here. Hold Alt while you're doing the mask. Actually invert select right off the gate. So now that front part is selected. And if you hold Alt and tap the location, they'll send you a gizmo straight on up. We're just going to scale that down a little bit. Also, if I go too fast on this, please stop me and ask the questions. But so this is what we have right now. If we turn off symmetry by hitting X, then this is what we'll have. And I'm also trying something new today, guys, where I actually have a keyboard input showing. And so hopefully that's helpful too, as I'm explaining what's going on. Sometimes I go a little fast. But now we have this, and this tapered key is really all we need. We need to just kind of fine tune it a little bit, just so that we have good edge flow. So that way we can turn around, subdivide it, add some thickness, and then we can end up using these single-sided surface keys to create a lot of our custom cuts. So from here, we're going to grab back to the Z modeler. We're going to hover over an edge, make sure that insert is selected. Love that keyboard. Nice. And we're going to go ahead and just drag an edge loop up to close to the edge. We, get it as close as possible without going too crazy. And we're going to just kind of place these edge loops. Turn on symmetry, of course. We're just placing edge loops to kind of support the edges around, and you'll see why in a second. But by doing this, it's going to help us actually control the fall off. And you're just going to do something like that. Greetings! Hey, the Painted Dragon. How you doing? Welcome in, welcome in. And we're going to go ahead and create some edges on the outside, just like such. That's going to prevent it from rounding. And then when we hit D on the keyboard, that's going to go ahead and bring up our do we want to use dynamic subdivision? And we want to say yes. I say always yes. And now we have this key that has a nice soft fall off, but also is sharp enough and will work for what we need it to do. And what you'll notice is we're only seeing the front right now. Because it's single-sided, if we add double by going down to display properties and then clicking double, we can actually see the underside. And as you can see here, there's a space underneath, and that space right there is actually going to help us with the male and female cuts, the positive and negatives. So we have that right there. And now we're going to go to geometry, dynamic subdivision, and we're just going to apply a thickness. And we'll do a thickness of, let's say, like 0.002. Maybe 0.01. There you go. That'll work. For demonstration purposes, that'll work. I'll actually explain here in a minute that thickness and how you can control the thickness to get exactly the size that you want, which involves scaling. But this way, for demonstration purposes right now, we're just going to settle on that number. And now we have this key. And if we bring our cylinder back, what we can do is actually scale this up. Kind of rotate this around. Let's say about 90. 90. There we go. And this is what we are working with. This is what we're going to try to cut. If we go ahead and turn on Live Boolean, and then we move over to our subtool, you'll see that you have a few options. And we have these options basically indicate whether or not you're going to be intersecting, subtracting, or adding onto your model. So the first one usually is an additive. The second one is the cut, and that's what we want. And then the third one is intersect, which would actually do the difference between the two. But we're going to want the second option. And this is where it's really, really cool, because now what we can do is actually position this however we want to get the proper cut that we want. So if you wanted to have something where the key is off this way, you could do that. You can have it more center. It's completely up to you. And what I like to do is turn on transparent so I can see just how deep that cut or that key is. So let's say we want it right about there. Turn off transparent. Now, the important part about doing keys, at this point, I like to use folders, and then I like to make sure that I save a duplicate of that key so I don't have to keep remaking the same key over and over again. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift-Control-D, which will duplicate my subtool. And I'll just hide that just so that I have it for backup. And I'm going to take the folder. I'm going to create a folder with the cylinder and with the key, and we're going to basically pair those together. So Control F, call this cut test. We'll put our key in there. And now what we'll do is we'll go back to our key. This part's super important. Anytime you're using dynamic subdivision to create a key for cutting, you need to make sure that that dynamic subdivision is applied, because if not, then you'll actually get a single plane cut, which won't work. You need that space. So what we'll end up doing is we'll go down to the cutter, we'll go down to geometry, and then we'll go ahead and hit apply. And now this thing is actually a solid subtool. We could turn double off and you can see that it works. And then from there, let's go ahead and turn solo back off. Come up to the folder, go ahead and say Boolean folder. And now we're looking at this part. What is up, Chris? From here, if we turn on the polyframe by hitting Shift F, we can go ahead and actually go to polygroups and hit auto groups. And now we'll get two separate subtools. If you get two separate polygroups, that means you did it right. If you get one polygroup, then that means that it wasn't cut properly and you have to check what went wrong. Go ahead and select this section here and we can see that cut. And then we'll just do a split head in real quick. So now we have our negative, positive, male and female cut joints that we just created. We can turn live boolean off, and that works that way. What is up? What is up? Just going over key cutting. For those of you new, welcome in. My name is Ian, and today we're going over how to scale in ZBrush and how to create 3D keys for 3D prints, etc., etc. No articulation today. I'm still working on a couple of my cutters. So if anybody has any questions about articulation, especially if you're asking questions after the stream, which if you do, please just go ahead and comment down below and somebody from Pixologic or myself will answer those. I want to make sure that the tools that I get for articulation are proper before I try to explain it, because I want to be able to release them too. So if you have articulation questions, I can do small demos, but I mainly want to just try to focus on the basics of cutting first. Just got home. Nice, dude. Nice. So so far what I've covered is, does anybody have any questions? I don't want to move on too quickly. And cool, you love the keyboard. Nice. Yeah, I'm hoping it's not too much of a distraction, but just the ability to kind of show those inputs, I think, is going to be really, really helpful. So that's kind of what I'm hoping it does. Just got to remember where it's at in the screen. So, okay, so I have questions about keys. Tolerance. Okay, cool, Vic. So tolerance is actually what we're going to do right now. So let's start with I'm going to start with a new cylinder. Actually, no. Let's just go back to the first one. Sorry, jumping around too much. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to delete this. Actually, not delete. Let's just move forward. Let's add a new cylinder, and I'll explain tolerance right now. So tolerance is a little bit tricky because tolerance is going to be based on the scale of your scene. And so the way I set up tolerance is all based on a 1-inch cube. So we're going to go ahead and cover how I would recommend you do that. This is just one method, of course. And if I lose you, let me know. I have a Photon S, and when I print, I have to sand them kind of a lot. God, why? Yeah, okay. No, totally understandable. So the two ways that I would set up all revolve around either a bounding box that sets my overall scale or something that revolves around 1 inch. The reason I do this is that I have more controllable results. So what we're going to do before we go too farther is we have the original key that just has dynamic subdivision on. And we're going to go ahead and duplicate that. So we'll just work within this one. And we have our cylinder. So we're going to go ahead and add this in, call this test 2. And we're going to go ahead and add in our key here. Now, before we do anything to the key, what we need to do, like I said, is set the scale. So we're going to insert a cube 3D. And the only purpose for this is for setting that tolerance. The way Scale Master works is it bases its size off of a subtool. How consistent that subtool is from one thing to another, it will vary, of course, right? Because no subtool is the same size unless it's the same object. So if you have an item like a 1-inch cube, not only can you send that cube to the printer to make sure it's the right size, or send it to your clients who want a specific size, but it'll help you control the tolerances. Hello, what's up, Moji? Hello. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert a cube, and we're going to rename this 1-inch, okay? And then we're going to go to Z plugin. And what I'm going to do is actually here on the side, I'm going to go ahead and take Z plugin and just kind of plop this over here. And we're going to go to Scale Master. And what we're going to do is hit Set Scene Scale. The moment you hit Set Scene Scale, whatever object or subtool you have selected, that is what it's going to base its measurement system on. So we're going to go ahead and hit Set Scene Scale. And ZBrush defaults at that 2mm cube size. It's very basic. So you just go ahead and say, boom, 2mm. So that's where it starts. So defaults, no special project folders, just what you open and start with, sets at 2mm. Hello, Sparky. The Meyer King, hello. So from here, what we need to do is resize this. So we're going to go ahead and go to right down here at the bottom. There's X, Y, and Z. Doesn't matter which one you pick because we're going to keep them the same size. So we're going to click it and type in 25.4. 25.4 millimeters is equivalent to 1 inch. And that's something to remember. You can also Google that if you ever forget it. So 1 inch, 25.4 millimeters. That's going to be your golden number to work with. And I like to scale in millimeters just because that's how most 3D printers and slicers function. So that's why, if anybody was wondering. Once we type in 25.4 millimeter, we'll go ahead and hit Resize Subtool. And we'll just let it work its magic. Now, this might take a while depending on how many tools you actually have, or subtools you actually have within your project. So, you know, if it takes a while, don't worry. Now we have this. We're going to go back to solo just for a second. Now that we have this, we're going to go back and hit Set Scene Scale one more time. This is not necessary, but this is like kind of peace of mind, at least for me. Then it confirmed that it's at 25.4 millimeter. Now we have a good amount of tolerance to work with. We know we can work within that inch. And if you look up right at the top, it'll actually have a millimeter. Usually this number at the top of ZBrush starts with units. Once you set that to a millimeter, centimeter, inch, or feet, whichever you choose to work with, it will set to that function, which is nice. Now what we can do is we can actually kind of go through and confirm some of our numbers. So we're going to go ahead and hide this 1 inch cube. And I'm going to go ahead and save this real quick. Just call this keying test. So we'll just call this key test. That way, in case we have a crash or something. Okay. Now we're gonna check our tolerances. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to our plane that we have here, and we're gonna go Subtool, Geometry, Dynamic Subdivision, and turn that on. Now what we can do is really check the thickness of something, and you can do that with the transpose tool. So I kind of know what I'm looking for. So with thickness, I usually go 0.002, and I hit enter. That's usually a good size for me. If we go back to the live Boolean, come in and make sure that we have that set. Now, some of this is trial and error, but we're going to go ahead and maybe increase that thickness a little bit more. Let's go 0.02. There we go. So now you can see we have a cut, but we don't know how big that is. So what we can do is actually increase the thickness a little bit. Let's go 0.06, just so we can really see. Actually, let's go a little bit bigger. Let's go 0.1, right? Now what we can do is we can measure this. So we're going to hit W for the gizmo, and then hit Y for the transpose tool. That'll allow us to drag this out. We're going to zoom into that gap, and we're actually going to hold Shift and drag our transpose tool. And right at the top, it'll tell us 0.2041 millimeters. That's your tolerance. That's what you're working with. And then you just have to decide whether or not that number is too big or too small for what you're doing. For me, that's pretty big. You really only need like, you know, a 0.1 millimeter cut if you want, but depending on your machine, depending on the calibration of your machine, you just kind of want to play with that and see which number works for you. But now we can go ahead and, like I said, adjust that thickness. Then with the transpose tool, zoom in, grab a spot that's close to the edge, hold Shift, drag that to the next point, and this one is a 0.07 millimeter cut. Okay, that might be pretty good. And that's how you can check before you even commit to your cut within your scene. And then if you like that, go ahead and hit Y to get rid of the transpose tool again, hit Q to get rid of the gizmo. Now you know that that's what that cut is based on that thickness of, what do I have, 0.03748. So then I know, okay, that's a 0.07 millimeter cut. Does that make sense, Vic? I know it's a bit technical, but you have a lot of control within that feature. Haha, smart. Yep, gotta save. Exactly. I'll tell you guys, I have had too many whoopsies. Yes, a bit. Okay. Dependent on the size of cut that you need, will depend on how your project is going to be processed. For 3D printing, I usually find that a 0.1 millimeter to 0.2 millimeter is a little bit, like a 0.2 millimeter is almost a bit aggressive, but that's a wall thickness, you know, like most 3D printers will print at 0.2 millimeter nozzle height. So, you know, you may want to go a little bit higher depending on the project, but about 0.2 millimeter would almost make something seamless. So that would just be one layer of your print. If you go FDM, that would actually be missing. So then that would blend in with each other. If you test your machine, you make that cut, and then you find out that it's not working, then you get to next time go back and make that adjustment. And you can note those findings because you'll have a consistent subtool of 1 inch to then base all that off of. So that's why it's super important to grab a subtool like a cube, go ahead and set that scale to 1 inch, and then after you do that, you'll always have that to rely on. And each time you bring in your project, if you sit there and say, oh, I need to save and go home, when you load up ZBrush again, you just go back to that 1 inch cube, set scene scale, it should already be 1 inch, you'll recognize it, and then that'll just reset you up. Yeah, so depending on the minimum layer height of my printer, yes. Yeah, so depending on the minimum layer height of your printer, that's what you want to do. With resin printing, we can have micron levels of like 50 micron or 0.05. So you can have much tighter tolerances in resin printing than you could in FDM printing. So depending on where that is going to go will greatly depend on what process you're putting it through. So if you want it for resin, you could probably get away with something like a 0.1 cut. But if you want to go with FDM, yeah, 0.2 is probably more favored. This is fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Not a problem, the Painted Dragon. Not a problem at all. I know that scaling could be a little bit of a confusing topic, so I have no problems getting into it a little deeper. But essentially, if you just create a control subtool, that's going to basically create the scene for your whole project, the whole scale for your project. and then you can go ahead. So you could focus on sculpting, have an idea of how big something might be, focus on that, and then when you're done sculpting and ready for the technical stuff, you can load in a cube, set your scale, good to go. Okay, now I get it. Thank you. Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem. And so now, once you create your key, which by the way, guys, what's really cool about this is, so I created this key, right? So we can save this as a brush or save it as a subtool to then bring in later. It's really up to you. But because it's a single-sided geometry, until we make it, until we make it anything else, the single-sided geometry is completely customizable to get what you want. So from here, we can either create a new brush by hitting B for the brush, and then say create insert mesh brush, which of course you want this set up in a way that's going to be beneficial to you. So let's just hide everything except for what we need. And then let's just go up to our brushes and then say create insert mesh, say new, right? And now we can drag this out and we can place these wherever we want. So make sure to do that as well. So that's really cool. Or you just save it as a subtool. Of course, go save as and just do your thing. So now, let me go over another way to make a key that's a little bit more old school, but you might have a little bit more control of that depth if you're really trying to. I say I lean more towards doing live boolean because you can really measure out. But let's say you have to create a custom key because sometimes, depending on your own personal project, or maybe you're working with a client or a company that says, please cut it this way, you may have to create custom keys. And in order to do that, we kind of can try a few tricks. So let's go back to a cylinder that what we want to do is, let's say this is a leg. In fact, let's just go ahead really quickly. I'm going to sculpt the world's fastest leg. Right? All right, let's do the Dynamesh real quick. Go 64 resolution. Right, back that up. Boop, there we go. Let's make a quick shape here. Okay, it's the world's slowest leg. I lied to you guys. But we're just gonna quickly make a shape real quick, right? Don't judge me based on this. This is this is how quickly can we show something? So let's say we have a leg here, right? So what we're gonna do is we want the leg to go into the hip, but we don't know exactly. We don't have anything to cut. We can't put that plain key in there. That's what we're going to be making. Hey, Ninja. Hey, what is going on, pre-drag? How you doing? How you doing? So there'll be some instances where you'll need to make a key that's like, okay, take this leg off. Once you chop it off, now we need to, we need to go ahead and make this have a key insert into the hips, right? So let's call this my leg, and you'll know it's a leg because I'm going to put some Wolverine ears on them. Right, so here you go, there you go. Here's our little really fast muscles, right? There you go, here's your shin, and here's your knee. Real fast, there we go, expert, ship it. Okay. All right, you got your back muscles. There we go. Okay. And just so we can demonstrate completely accurately, let's grab an insert. Let's grab a sphere. And let's call the sphere the hip, right? This is where we're going to be. This is what we're going to be keying this leg to. Ship it. Hey, what's up, MJ Sculpts? Hello, hello. It's fine, right? Yeah, it's beautiful. Okay. So we have this leg, and, you have to cut the leg off, and you have to add a key to it. Okay, so what we need to do first, obviously, would be to split it, which we did. And let's go ahead and call this key leg test. I'm going to open up this file one day and be like, what is that? So let's go ahead and solo this out. And we can just make a key out of a cube. It's really just no big deal. We're even going to just hit Control-Shift-D to duplicate the leg. We're going to go down to initialize. We're going to go to Q cube, turn everything down to 1, and hit Q cube. And there we go. This is our leg, right? This is our key, is what we're going to use. So now what we're going to do, turn on transparent. We're just going to go ahead and scale this up and place this cube like at a 20-degree angle. That's fine. And yep, this works out great. And we're actually going to make it more rectangular and stick that in there. Okay, let's turn on the polyframe, Shift F. Make it all one color. Yeah, my masterpiece, right? So now what we're going to do is the same thing that we did for the plane. We're essentially just going to do the same thing, except for we don't need to make the plane anymore. What we're going to do now is we're just going to make the taper cut. So I'm going to select those 2 points right on the top. And because it's a Q cube, it only has the 6 sides. So now what I can do is actually invert that mask. And then we're just going to taper that down. So we have that. Let's hide the hip for a second. And now what we're going to do is actually just kind of unmask it, kind of shrink this down. And we're just going to fit it to the leg. And it doesn't have to be a cube. It can be this kind of really cool funky shape. Something like that. Right? And now all we're going to do, you can do one of 2 things. You can either go to geometry. You can go to, where are you? There we go. Bloop. Yeah, go to geometry, and right underneath, right next to divide is this SMT button. You can just go ahead, which stands for smooth, by the way. You can just go ahead and uncheck that SMT button, and then you can divide a few times, say 100,000. And now we have a relatively solid key. And we're like, great, wonderful. That's perfect. So it didn't smooth as you subdivide like it normally would. If we were to back that up for a second and actually check that smooth on, you start subdividing, you see it gets smaller and smaller. Uncheck it, Control-D, subdivide, get that up to about 100,000. That'll make it dense enough. You need to make sure that your keys are dense enough in order to cut properly. The other way you can do it is subdivide it a bunch, delete lower, and you can even Dynamesh it at like 128, and that will also give you a pretty accurate result. So if you want to keep it Dynamesh or if you want to keep it subdivided, that's up to you. I usually recommend keeping something subdivided just because it's usually easier to work with, in my opinion. And you don't have to delete lower yet. Now what we're going to do is we're going to merge this to the leg. But before we do, let's say I want this big key, right? But I have things that are kind of protruding out the sides a little bit. So what we can do is we can either go up a subdivision a little bit more, or like I said, Dynamesh it. Let's try with a higher subdivision. We can actually hide these keys a couple ways. We can either just, clip it, kind of go up and actually start trimming, which would be one way of working on it. Or what we can do is use the ZBrush brush. So we hit B, Z, and then P, which will give us ZBrush. If we hold the spacebar, turn off RGB unless you need it, and actually adjust the intensity, what we can start doing is actually we can start painting our model or this key to match the leg, because we're just going to be merging it. So we can use ZBrush, which will then take that shape and project any subtool that's in the way of it to that key. So now that we can get that nice smooth transition. And this tool comes in really handy when you start doing any type of articulation or creating custom cuts. So you can use ZProject for that. Now what we can do is merge them together, either with folders like I like to do, because with folders you're able to go back and fix things if you find errors later, or you can just hit merge down. I'm going to put it in a folder, call it leg. And I'm going to add the key into that folder. And now what I'm going to do is actually going to merge it all together. So let's just go ahead and hit merge folder. So now I have my key. Now, this is where it gets a little technical, but it's all based on the same thing with setting up our scene for success so we can have controlled numbers. So what we're going to do is... Yes, I must remember to watch this again later with a pen and paper handy. Not a problem. And again, if I'm going too fast, which I tend to do when I ramble, please let me know, and I will definitely, I'll definitely go over it again. But yes, it is going to be recorded, so... All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to insert that cube one more time. So bring in a cube, rename this 1 inch, which again is just like that standard. That's fine. My pace is fine. Woohoo! Okay, cool. So we're going to bring in that 1 inch. And then from here, we're going to go to set scene scale. Again, it's saying that 1 inch, or that cube is 2 millimeter. And we're like, well, that's not what we want. So we're going to go ahead and click the 2 millimeter so we can now resize. So we're going to go to our slider, type in 25.4, which is equivalent to 1 inch. Again, just using millimeter. And then hit resize subtool. Now, sometimes you might get this error. And with this error, it's just trying, it basically is saying that, you know, it exceeds the recommended size of ZBrush. This can happen one of two ways. Either just something is literally that big, or you've resized once before in another project and ZBrush finds conflict. So I usually just hit OK, and a lot of times it's fine. Make sure to save first, just in case. But we're just going to go ahead and say OK. It's now resized, nothing looks warped, everything looks good. Go ahead and hit set scene scale again with that 1 inch cube, and it says 25.4 millimeter. So now we know that's 1 inch. We say OK, and now we can hide that. Now what we can do is use this leg to actually cut the hole in our hip. So what we're going to do is we're going to just duplicate our hip. So Control-Shift-D to duplicate any subtool or folder you have selected. I'm going to put this in a new folder, trying to stay organized, call this hip cut. And now I have my leg here. I'm going to duplicate this leg, so I'm going to call this final leg, right? Because I'm done with all my articulation and stuff, and I'm just ready to use it as a cutter. So final leg with an S, because I can't spell. Control-Shift-D to duplicate that leg, and now we're going to hide the original. And now with the duplicate, we're going to turn this into a cutter. And the easiest way to do that is to bring that leg up into the folder, go ahead and highlight the second tool that says the cutter tool. And now if we rotate that hip, you can see that it's cutting. But it's just... it is just a 1-to-1, meaning that it's not big enough to accept. We actually have to change the size of this leg so we can do this evenly. So with this here, I'm going to go ahead and go down to deformation. And now I'm going to use the inflate feature, and I'm going to go point, what is it? What did I do? I do 0.115 to 0.2. Which is kind of the number that I found. And so it's kind of hard to see, but it's scaled up a little bit. If we don't like it, we need to go more. We can go ahead and hit 0.2 again. We can size this after we make a test cut. That leg, I know, right? Yo, luck. Good luck. Thanks, man. It's a Wolverine leg. Yeah. Loving it. The cutting part is so cool, like a puzzle. It really is, yeah. And with the cutting, it takes a little bit of trial and error too, so don't be afraid to try a cut and see how it works. But we can always measure things once we get something worthwhile, right? So now that we have that cut, what we can do is highlight this sphere, and we can actually flip normals. And if I can, there it is, okay. So I'm actually gonna highlight the cube. Actually, first we need to actually make the cut, so let's go ahead and just Boolean the folder. Okay, so we got a little bit of an error. What that error was saying was that the leg wasn't properly merged together. So sometimes when you merge things together but it doesn't stitch together, ZBrush will see it as multiple subtools. We need to fix that. So what we can do, a couple ways. Let's correct that fix. Let's go ahead here, go back to the leg. We could do this one of two ways. We can either just Dynamesh this together, because it is two parts, which I recommend doing. It saves yourself a lot of problems. Or we can try another one, which is geometry, modify topology. We're going to go weld points and close holes. And that will fix that problem too, a lot of the times. And now let's go ahead and try it again. Let's go ahead and hit Boolean folder. So let's make sure that we put that hip cut back on, turn off our polyframe, and go ahead and Boolean folder. If it errors out this time, which it didn't, but if it were to have errored out, then I would have gone ahead and Dynameshed it and called it a day. All right. So now we have this. It's beautiful, right? So now we get to check to see if our sizing is correct. And again, depending on what machine you're going to be cutting or printing on, will depend on the size you want to aim for. My recommendation is if you're going for FDM, try to get that 0.2 millimeter. If you're going for resin, try to at least get that 0.5, 0.6 millimeter cut. That's basically just removing a layer line. It'll give you a nice and seam, but you'll have to kind of play with your settings, because if your printer's out of tolerance or things are going wrong, then that number could adjust. So a lot of factors, but those are ideal numbers to hit. So we want to check that, right? So the same way we checked the other one with the transpose tool, this is exactly how we're going to do it. But we're going to go ahead and I like to turn off the lines. We're going to go to display properties and hit flip. And that's going to flip normals, okay? Now we're going to go back to our original leg. And now we're going to turn on transparent. And we can kind of see inside the leg a little bit. And what we can do is actually zoom all the way in. And you can see there's a little bit of a gap. Hit W for the gizmo, Y for transpose. And we can zoom in, grab, hold shift, and kind of check that number. And this number is small, guys. This number is 0.02 millimeters. That's tiny. That's nothing. That's not going to work, right? So now we can go ahead and fix that. So let's go back and fix it. And so I typed in 0.2 for the inflate. So we can actually go much bigger than that. So we're going to go ahead and go back in here. We'll delete this guy because we don't need it. We'll take this leg and we'll inflate it more. And deformation, inflate. And I would say, like, at this point, probably go with like 0.4. Just something that's nice and big. There we go. And we'll try this and we'll remeasure. So we'll go ahead, hit Boolean folder. Come on down. Let's go ahead and flip our normals. So display properties, flip normals, turn on transpose, turn on the leg that we need, select the leg that we need so we can actually see the leg and the inside of our cube. Zoom all the way in, if it'll let me. There we go. Hit W for the gizmo, Y for the transpose, and we're going to go ahead and that's about 0.06. So it's safe to say that we can easily go up like maybe a full percent, and that will give us what we need. Hello, hello. How's everybody doing? Happy Easter, by the way, guys. Okay. And so, again, we'll just make our adjustments. So, and this is how you can control those tolerances. Again, we've set our whole scene scale based on that 1 inch. So now we know that we can make bigger changes. And again, we duplicated the leg. So let's actually go 0.5. Like, let's make it large. Large and in charge, right? And we can go ahead, Boolean folder, and we can do this until we get what we need. And you need to make sure that you have it all selected. Boolean folder. Hey. Wow, you're like the second of Michael Palpatine. It's awesome. That's such a huge compliment. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Michael is insane, and I learned so much from him. So, all right. All right, so let's go ahead and do... Let's go flip, and we just repeat this until we get what we want. The only problem with this method, unfortunately, as you guys can see, is it just takes time. But what I have done is I've spent the time, created my project folders, or created something that I knew I could then write down those findings. So there you go, 0.1 millimeter, which it says right up here. So I've written down my findings, and then now I just kind of follow that as a standard. And that's what I definitely recommend you guys do too. So you initially did 0.2 inflate and now 0.4, so then 5. So that would be a total of 1.1. Correct, yeah. Yep. And remember too, guys, so if anybody's lost on what those numbers represent, when you are on any of these sliders, it goes from 0 to 100 or 0 to negative 100. That 100 is a percentage. So one full swipe on the slider all the way across is 100% of that subtool's size. So that would double times 2. So initially what I'm saying is that it takes about 1 to 1.5% of your subtool's original size to make a good cut. So yes. And I definitely wanted to show you what it would do as we're doing that slide. But now we have that custom cut. So now we know if we go back to this tool and go back to, whoops, our display properties, we hit flip again. And now we know we have a custom cut and a leg piece that fit together. But yeah, it is a little tedious, but is definitely, that is correct. Does that make sense for everybody? Because what I'm going to do is, so you guys remember the Olifist Sea Dragon I sculpted? So before my internet decided to scream at me last week, we were in the middle of cutting this, and so I figured if you guys understand this a little bit better, then we can move on with finish cutting this guy. And then if we run out of time, I actually have another project that I'd like to show you guys that I'll cut as well. So we can go ahead and start moving that. Hola, Next Knox. Hello, hello. How you doing, buddy? How you doing? So yeah, so there's our custom leg. Super beautiful. And then we save it and ship it. Does that make sense, guys? Also, too, it looks like my internet's on fire today, so I'm really happy about that. All right. So, with that being said, let's go over what we did last week while my internet was screaming at me. Yeah, so we're going to take this file, and we're making it for 3D so that we can 3D print it. That's correct. So, what I did last week was I set up custom keys that have dynamic thickness, and I prepped them all over the place. There's definitely a couple things here that have a custom key, like this guy right here, that we were setting up that we can then turn around and cut. And what we did with the leg, I did with this ship right here, which is cutting this against the wave. We inflated it, so that way when we go to print it, we have a spot for the ship to fit that we can glue on. Hello, hello! Welcome in, welcome in. So this is what we were doing last week. And so first, let's go ahead and kind of finish what we were doing. Now let's actually go to, we have our 1-inch cube. Let's actually make sure that that's what it is, which it is. Perfect. That always makes life so much easier. Yay. Okay. We have our basic key there. We don't need that one. So let's just focus on this dragon. Okay. So I have a couple things. I have the main dragon itself. I have a key that's underneath here that we're gonna pretty much use and get trimmed up. And then I have a head key as well. And what I want to make sure before anything else is, yes, okay, that sticks right where I want it to. Perfect. Okay. That's exactly what I need. Nice. Now, actually, as I'm kind of thinking about it a bit more, we don't really need this key down here at the bottom. So let's actually get rid of that one, because we're just going to end up using the dragon itself as a key, just kind of like how I showed you with the leg. Wow, how do you make that dragon ball character right there? How did I make this this Vegeta? I'm still getting a articulated version of Vegeta tested. In fact, here I'll load them up so you guys can see it. It's a little bit of a heavy file though, so let's see where let's see how well it loads. Let's see, ZBrush work. Let's go here. This is a personal project I've been working on for a little bit. I got him about 7 inches for a good scene scale. You can see I've done this a few times. Because with toys, it doesn't matter if you're cutting keys or if you're cutting joints. It's customizable for each project. And so, if you guys would like to see, this is my Vegeta. He's a little thick though, a little dense. But you can see how many parts this one is. And the point of this project is to actually get them articulated so that I have my own custom figure. Oh, hey! Zodon and X-Nox. I know. So you guys can see here in this, for example, if you're going to do joints, this is 32 subtools, including pins, hinges, all made in ZBrush. And I need to test print it to make sure it works. And if it does, we'll be talking more about it. So I sculpted this Vegeta, and then to make him up here where I wanted the head, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this one. So then what I did was I just took the head. So let's say this is the head that I wanted to work with. All you need to do is actually just send this to the center of your scene. Hit F on the keyboard, then you go to Preferences, Make Cam View, and then you just hit Make Cam View. And then I'll take whatever subtool you have, including color, and then it will make it that cam. And then from there, you get a texture that you can then save out. And so you would go to Export, and then you would go to this PC, or your whatever, if you're on Mac, it's a little bit different. Go to Program Files, go to Pixologic, which is right here, and then go to ZBrush 2021, Startup, see Startup, and then Cam View, and you would save it in here. Save it whatever you would like, JPEG, PSD, it all works. And then you go to Preferences, Config, and then Store Config. And if you want to change it back, just go back to Cam View, and then you can go Next. And you can cycle through ones that you've made or ones that come stock with ZBrush. And you just scroll through until you have the one that you want. And now you have your own custom Cam View. So that is it. Excited to see the articulation. Yes, I am excited to get it working to where I can easily explain it. It's taken a while to develop, and the problem with articulation is that there's not a lot of information out there. And so in 3D printing, articulation is kind of hard. Like there's no way around it. Like it's pretty hard to get it right because you have a lot of factors from what kind of material you're using to your process. And the same could be said if you do any type of articulation for a toy company. You have to worry about overhangs, you have to worry about injection molds, you have to worry about the process in which the toy gets made. For 3D printing, we work with hard materials. So while I've had good success with FDM print test, I've had not so good success with resin. So I'm kind of testing things, and I want to make sure I share the right information before I just start talking about it. So we're going to get there, I promise. Besides ZBrush, what else do I use? Oh, I mainly use ZBrush, to be honest with you. Because I make statues and toys, 99% of my work is almost ZBrush. But I have done things that I've needed to use, like my Substance Painter. You know, I've done other projects for that stuff. But mainly for sculpting statues and toys, ZBrush, you can do it all in ZBrush, which is cool. Yeah, there's almost no need for me to leave ZBrush because I'm not projecting details anywhere. And there's almost no need to re-topo unless you actually need some sort of edge loop control, like during the sculpt process. So now if we come back here, let's prep our keys. So now we have it kind of positioned the way we want it. And we're going to go ahead and Boolean folder. Actually, before we Boolean folder, let's go ahead and apply. And now we hit Boolean folder. There we go. And now let's take a look at this dragon where we cut him. You can see here I have multiple poly groups. Let's go ahead and hit auto groups. And you see it's all one piece, so it didn't cut right. So I need to go back over and see what happened. So let's delete that one. And this happens sometimes. So let's actually hide the base for a second. Let's click here. Let's see what happens. That's been applied. Let's try it one more time. Maybe I just didn't have something turned on. Pixologic ZBrush, hey, can you tell what is your hardware, please? And do you stream on separate PC? Thank you. I do not stream on a separate PC. I stream on the same PC. I'm running an AMD 7. What is it? AMD 730? 3800, I think. Yeah. I got like 48 gigs of RAM, and then I have the RTX 2080 graphics card. So yeah. Okay. There we go. Let's try that. Let's look at that one more time. So I probably just had something kind of hidden weird. Now I have different subtools. I can go ahead and select, and you see I have a cut there. And then I can go ahead and split hidden. And now I have two pieces that I can operate from. There we go. All right. So now what we're going to do is that thing that we did with the leg and the hip, we're going to do that with the dragon itself. So we have the head. Let's go ahead and rename this final dragon head cut. And then we're going to go ahead and rename this final dragon body. It looks so cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, we sculpted this live, and it was a lot of fun. The other thing I'm noticing, too, so there's a few things we can do to make life easier for ourselves when we're trying to cut for a 3D print. And a lot of times you want to avoid this. And this happens a lot. It's kind of a little funky arc that we have down at the bottom. And also, we have some tearing right here. Which this can happen depending on if something's too small. What inflate did I have done for the head? After I sized it, I did about 0.02 for thickness under subdivision. Yeah. So if I go back here, I can double check. Yeah, thickness 0.002 for this one, which worked well with this scene. I can just see an obvious gap, and I can come in and measure that. Let's actually measure it. Let's see what we got. That number that I'm using for the thickness or the deformation, just know it's scene dependent based on the scale you set it. So though the numbers I'm using currently might be working, it's possible that it won't work for you. So double check that before you do anything. And it looks like I'm at 0.3 millimeters, so it's quite big of a cut. But for what we're doing, I'm going to go ahead and leave that. I think that might be okay. A lot of times I'm used to as well, it's hard to see, but let me see if I can pull up a model I've sculpted real quick. It's hard to see a little bit, but a big trick when filling print holes is using wood filler. Oh, also too, I forgot to put that banner on. Let me switch that banner over. I'm all over the place today. Sorry, guys. Okay. So full screen real quick. Just going to transition over. So let's see if you can guys see this real quick. So a lot of times you want to try to keep your keys as seamless as possible. You can tell there's a hairline, but that hairline is actually a cut. And so when you're trying to separate your parts, sometimes you can create custom cuts, and you know, but if you ever need anything filled, what you can do is use something like premium wood filler, where you glue and then you put this in between, and then you can sand that down and it comes out real easy. And it's really good, especially if it's going to be just a standalone statue that is then going to go ahead and get that's then going to get painted. That's a great way to utilize that. ZBrush texturing will be in ZBrush or software. For toys, high-res sculpting, everything can be done in ZBrush. I do everything in ZBrush for that. In fact, if I want to get more of the texture to pop, what I'll do is, before I export, I'll actually boost up the contrast by going deformation, and then I'll actually increase the contrast, and that'll make a lot of those details pop. But I do everything in ZBrush. Yep, 3mm more than enough. Exactly, yeah. 0.3 millimeter and we're good. Ship it as is. So again, yeah, you know, the cuts, the size of the cut, it's all dependent on you. Unless you're, you know, again, unless you're doing, you know, studio work or client work and they say, hey, can you make, you know, unless they give you specifics, which I usually don't get. Most of my clients, they'll just want the project and then I have some creative control. But sometimes I've been asked, can you make sure that the cuts aren't so thick, you know, and given a practical guideline. That's happened to me before, rare, but it happened. So unless you're tied to a number, you have freedom. And in doing so, yeah, play with it, you know, trial and error, see what works best for you and your machines, and that should help you out. When it's already printed, then you combine each cut. Is it strong enough, or does it need some kind of magnets to it? I actually use glue, but for magnets, yeah, you can get some simple magnets. The cuts themselves don't usually hold themselves well together, so you kind of need some sort of putty or glue or magnets to push in there. I like epoxy sculpt for filling and key work if they come out loose. Yeah, that works out great too. Oh, by the way, how about colors from CG to real? What's the difference? In real life, is the color darker on 15-20% because most of the time interiors are darker most of the time. I don't know if I'm understanding your question correctly. Do you mean the poly paint? Like, the poly paint is just more of a guide of, like, a test for me to kind of see the details of what I'm painting. But if I use it for render purposes, usually poly paint is fine. It's just material based. But I don't usually do a whole lot of, like, other programs with it. Hey, from Brazil, how are you doing, Lewis? Welcome in, welcome in. Can wood filler be used for small divots? that are sometimes created when removing supports. Yes. Yeah, if you have small little divots or nooks or little, little pockets that come out because you clipped too short or the support ripped it off, yeah, you can use wood filler to go in there and kind of touch them up a little bit. What do you think about Blender sculpting? Have you ever used it? Well, this is a Pixologic, the creators of ZBrush. This is a ZBrush dedicated stream. But if you would like to get my opinion on Blender sculpting, you can always check out my links, and you can hit me up on my private streams. But it's fine. What up, Ian? Congrats on getting to the ZBrush mains, man. Thanks, Quintus. How you doing? Quentin, how you doing? Okay. Let's move forward. So what we want to do, too, is I'm actually going to backtrack a little bit. So I'm actually going to get rid of this head and this one, because I want to show you guys one more thing, and that is, if you take a look at the depth of this cut, I'm going to want this to be kind of a flat plug-in a little bit. So I'm actually going to want to set myself up for a little bit of success. So I'm actually going to create a flat cut on the bottom, and by doing so, I'm just going to go ahead and insert a cube, something like this. Put the lines on. I'm actually going to choose the poly cube, which is a great cube, by the way. And we're actually going to go ahead and flatten this a little bit, expand this up. I'm just using this for cutting purposes. I'm actually going to drop this in, and I'll show you what I'm doing here in a second. I want the bottom of him to be flat so that when I print him, that I have a nice clean connection between the base and him. So we're gonna actually set this part to cut. And you can see that I can adjust this however I need to. Let's pull up the base for a second. And let's position that, let's say right about there. There we go. So that will cut pretty nicely. So now I'll have a nice flat bottom underneath. Maybe we'll actually raise that up a bit, and then I'll adjust the base position. Ideally, I just want a nice clean cut, nice clean surface. So now that I do that, we'll go ahead and we'll re-boolean the whole folder. Let's see, real question. You see now raw colors. If you do printing, do you really need boost colors or saturation 25%, 25% to make something else close to CG? Thanks. I actually do not know. I've never printed in color, so I do not know. But I'm sure I'll try to look that up. I don't know, but maybe you can also reach out to people within Pixologic. Go to pixologic.com or go to Ask ZBrush, and typically you can get an answer for them pretty quickly. I have not done printing with colors or having to boost saturations at all, so I don't know. Resin welding can be done and zapped with a UV pen light to smooth or to weld directly pieces. That's true. Yep, absolutely. I haven't played too much with it, but I know guys who have, and it seems pretty cool. So proceed carefully. Okay. So now I have this. Let's go back over. Let's auto groups. So now we have that. That's what we're working with. There we go. And then let's go ahead and split hidden. So now we have the body. And we have this. And sometimes if you get a weird information, if things are cutting kind of weird, you can close holes and that should fix it. That's actually an interesting thing. I have never gotten that before, so first time for everything, right? Hey, what's up, Talden? How you doing? Hello, Abby. How are you? Welcome in. Okay. So now we have that. Let's go ahead and move to the base. So let's rename this Final Dragon Head. And rename this one more time. Final Dragon Body. I try to name my subtools in a way that makes in a way that makes sense, that I'll kind of remember what it's like. But, you know, if for some reason, you know, I don't want to confuse myself, I try to name things to where I remember. So if I type in final, it actually is helpful for what it is. Same thing here. I'll rename this final ship, and that will kind of help me remember that that's what we're doing with it. Let's say it one more time. I use resin welding to join parts and fill small divots and things sometimes. Nice. Yeah. I use the wood fill because it's like $10 for, what is it? It's like $10 for 16 fluid ounces or 473 milliliters. And I've had this for like 2 months and I've only used like a fraction. And I print quite frequently. So yeah, whatever works. All that stuff too. Yeah. It's fun to get to like kind of do different tests and see what we got. All right. So let's finish cutting this. And then, like I said, I'm going until 8 p.m. Los Angeles time. So we still got like another hour and 45 minutes. So I have another project that I want to cut to continue the cutting thing. And next week, some of us are going to be using ZBrush Core Mini for our Pixologic stream. So if you would like to follow along and learn how to make statues using the free version of ZBrush, go ahead, download that, and we'll do something kind of fun and simple to use. What resin do you use for resin printing? I use Ceratech. It's one of my favorite resins. Really, really good stuff. Okay. So let's go ahead and hide the base. The dragon and such. Let's open up the base. And now what we're going to do with this dragon body is we're actually going to copy this and use it like we did with the leg to cut and give us a position within the base. And so what I'm actually going to do is take the base and let's put this on, and let's actually grab our move brush. And sometimes after you have made something, you still need to make adjustments for it to work. So I'm actually going to bring up the waves a little bit. Something like that. And that will help me. So when I cut into it, I have a little bit of thickness. And if you need to create thickness before you make a cut and you have the move brush on, you can go up to, where is it? Brush. And you can go to auto masking and you can turn back face mask on. And what that'll do with the brush is actually pull the normal alone. So instead, if we were to turn that off, I have a shortcut here. We move the whole thing. If I turn back face mask on, we can actually pull just a section. And that can help us get a little bit of thickness too if we need it. The type of resin or brand depends with tolerance of the print, or depends more on the print. I would actually say that depending on the resin, you do a test print because you might actually see some variation. I've tried Elgu resin, Anycubic, etc., and I find Ceratech to be more controllable. I get consistent results. So I would say just run a couple tests and then see if there's a variation. It's typically, I would say it's the setup in your model before it would be that, but at the same time, there are variables in cure processing, how long you cure something, etc., that might cause some sort of issue that could be shrinkage or whatnot. So the resins may not act the same. So yes, there could be a variation, but I would say run a test and then, get a 1-inch cube, cut it, maybe have that be your test, and then that could be your test print each time you start new resin. Let's see here. You make that ship too. Sometimes it's complicated to make hard surface in ZBrush. I did make the ship and I made it completely in ZBrush. And if you would like to see how I started that, actually go back to, if you go to ZBrush on YouTube, check their VODs. I think it was 2 streams ago, I sculpted the ship. And I did it all with Z Modeler out of a cube and some stuff. And then like the rope, there's actually an insert rope brush in here that you can utilize. So everything was done within ZBrush. Okay. Yeah, what's the best cure time? Nobody really talks about that. Best cure time? I think I've settled in at the first 4 to 5 layers at 60 seconds for your base cure, and then I cure about 8-second layers. So yeah, every 8 seconds for a cure layer. If you read the bottle, it gives you recommendations. And they usually recommend between, I think it's like between 6 and 12 seconds a layer after your initial few layers. So I find that 8 seconds works best for me. Okay. So I'm going to grab this dragon body. We're going to Control-Shift-D to duplicate. And that's going to be our cutter. So that's going to be our second cutter. So let's turn live boolean back on. And now we're going to go ahead and turn this guy on. And you can see here now, let's turn all the color off. It's a little distracting. Maybe not, actually. You can see now we're making that cut, right? But again, that's a 1-to-1 cut. And because we set our scene scale, I'm actually going to go to Decimation. We'll go to Inflate. And I'm going to do, let's try 0.5. Nope, that's a little small. So maybe we'll go, let's go full solid 1. And now we'll make sure that that's there. That's cutting. I already set that last week. So we'll go ahead and we'll boolean the folder. Or am I using mono screen? Actually, no. The machine I have is it's an ePax X1, and I believe the first one I got was with an RGB screen, and it was perfectly fine. I haven't had any issues with that. Oh, what do you mean curing at the very end, you mean? When it's all printed out? When it's all printed out, I usually cure my parts for... I have just like a box with foil on the inside, and then I have a UV light, and I usually set it to cure about 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and then I check it, and then I go another 5 minutes. You don't want to cure it too long, but if you have like a solar panel turntable, you can set it in there, and with the light in the box and then the foil, it like, you know, bounces that light around and it hits it from all angles. Usually 5 to 10 minutes, and it's mostly cured. If I'm ever in doubt, you know, I've left parts in the sun for like 40 minutes and freaked out, but it was fine. So, but I've had success between the 5-10 minute mark. It just depends on the power of the lights, how you're curing it, and then of course too the resin itself, how old it is, how fresh it is. So, okay. So now we have this. And this is something that a lot of people that I really wanted to cover. Sorry, and that is making sure that parts will fit correctly. And if we take a look, we have a really small kind of key there. So maybe let's go a little bit bigger. Again, sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error, but we can just kind of check a few things. See how it's working. We're going to make this a little bit bigger. So I did about 1%. So let's actually go up another 0.5%. So inflate. Let's make sure we're on the right tool first. Hold on. Yep, we are. Inflate. And we'll go about 0.5. Let's make it a little bit bigger. It's going to get glued into place, so I'm not really too concerned about anything else. And let's go ahead and boolean the folder. Very cool, stylish. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right. And just so you know, too, when you guys cut your parts, it might take a little bit of time, you know? So depending on how heavy your project is, this whole project's only 15 million. It's not very dense, but it's dense enough that we're going to want to shrink it down or decimate it for printing. But if you have a big, heavy file, just be patient if you try to cut. Okay. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about is, okay, so we have our cut here, but if we look on the inside, we have some issues, right? We have some scales because we use the tool in order to create a cutter. So we want to clean that up. And so what we can do is we can actually finalize this, maybe Dynamesh it, and then we could turn around and actually clean it up a little bit. Sometimes you'll have to do that. So what we can do is actually come in here. Let's see how dense this is. That's not too bad. So I'm going to turn on the trim dynamic. So BTD for trim dynamic. And we can even turn on Sculptris Pro here. Don't know why I just brain farted for a second. Okay. And the cool thing with Sculptris Pro is now we can select what we want to work on. So we don't have to have everything. Let's go up to Stroke, Sculptris Pro. I like to turn adaptive size off and kind of just see how that works. So that's pretty big. So I can actually turn the subdivision part down until I get some nicer lines. That's looking better. And now what we can do is go ahead, maybe we'll go a little bit lower. There we go. Back that up. And we can actually come in here and start cleaning up any sharp edges. Sometimes, you know, it's faster to do it manually. Depends on the project. We can also take the H polish if we wanted to. And as long as you're just careful of your edges, you can come in here and make some nicer areas. I've had to do this with a couple things, only with overhangs, so it's best to try to fix that if you can. But for here, this is kind of a down and dirty approach, but one that works. And all I'm doing is taking the sharp edge and kind of softening it a little bit. Nothing more. I'm not actually going in and sculpting the main size. I'm just going to come in here and just hit that edge a little bit, just to kind of almost bevel it, per se. And if you use Sculptris, then you're perfectly fine, because you're kind of rebuilding the geometry and controlling that edge a little bit more. And this will just help us get that sharp edge. There we go. I've also had to do this when I've cut something, I've spent hours cutting something, I'm almost done, and then I find that one overhang I missed, which happens. I've quickly gone in there and actually just kind of used Sculptris Pro and cleaned up those things. So like little tricks that aren't necessary every time, but I have found to be extremely helpful. And if I just check to make sure that none of these edges are actually impeding the connection points, then you're good to go. And with Trim Dynamic, it's a little bit better than Smooth, because Smooth will kind of just destroy it, where with Trim Dynamic, I can kind of just control those edges. So you can knock down an edge if you needed to, just to get it fixed, instead of worrying too much about anything. Do I also smooth out the scale texture? Yeah, if I feel like it's too much, which I'm going to do here, I'll smooth that out a little bit, or I'll just use Trim Dynamic, come in here, and again. And what's really cool is I don't want to hit this bottom part right here, right? Like this bottom part, I don't really want to affect that so much. So we can actually go to Brush, and we can control the depth. We can actually hit Depth Mask, and we can actually kind of control that a bit. So then it'll help us not mess up any edges we don't want. So we can adjust some of that. Drop that right about there. There we go. So I'm just lightly hitting it. Yeah. And again, this is more of the down and dirty version of it. If I really wanted to take this for like production, I would actually take this part of the tool, figure out how high it was, clean that up, then use that as a cutter. But this is one way of, like, you know, if you're doing a personal project and you just realized you don't want to go through that, this is one way to do it. Again, just knowing too that since I've cut it with the scales, I want to make sure that I hit the high points and leave the rest alone. So I don't want to change this too much because I've set that tolerance of the cut with the inflation using deformation. So I just kind of want to make sure I just lightly hit it. So I'm not opening it up too much. There we go. Something like that. And the beauty part, again, because we're making a statue, is that we're not worrying about the geometry. Like, look how gross that is on the inside, right? We're not worried about the geometry because we're just going to go ahead and decimate it, which destroys the geometry at the end of the day, making it more, you know, well-rounded. Hey, what's up, Slowbee? How you doing? Thanks for stopping by. Same thing here with the ship. Actually going to turn off the color. And again, I use let's go to, where are we? Stroke. I use the color to kind of just get an idea on how I would want to paint it or how I would want it to look in the render. Not necessarily for any other reason. There we go. That should be fine. All right, so now this would be the final base. And now we're going to do a few things before we finalize it. So I'm going to show you guys a trick that I started using about 6 months ago, which really started helping me make sure that things were properly exported for 3D print. And that is making sure that we go through close holes, weld points, and then we can check to make sure that it's a solid piece. Dynamesh is really good at doing that too, but you don't always want to Dynamesh your model, right? So what I'm going to do is make sure that there are no holes here. So with this final base, let's go ahead and save it. And now I'm going to go to geometry. I'm going to go to close holes just to make sure that there are no random holes. Because sometimes you can create a hole when you're cutting one subtool to another and you won't even know it. It might be like buried in the geo somewhere. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit weld points. So by closing holes and welding points, it's going to make sure that it finds every point of that subtool and make sure that each point is connected as well as it can be. From there, we're going to go ahead and go to our Z plugin. No, I'm sorry, not Z plugin. We're going to go to texture. Nope, sorry, transform. Sorry, transform. Go to transform. Down at the bottom, we have analyze selected subtool. You guys can see that. We're going to go ahead and click that. It's going to give you a size reading based on that subtool, which is fine. It's not setting your scene. It's just telling you what it is. But I'm going to click the millimeter to stay consistent from what I had before. I'm going to click millimeter, and this is what you really want to pay attention to. Right here, it'll say subtool size. Subtool is watertight. That's what we want to make sure so that when we export this out, it's going to go ahead and become watertight. So we can hit save. If you hit save, it's basically a CSV file. I've never used it, so no big deal. But that's how you ensure that it's watertight. Same with the ship here. Now the ship, we're going to go ahead. Geometry, close holes. Might take a minute. And weld points. Okay. Now we can go ahead and I'm going to hit auto groups. Cool. If you hit auto groups, and if you know it had multiple subtools that were not welded together, but it was there, if you hit auto groups and it's all one piece, typically it is welded. But we're still going to check. Transform, analyze selected subtool, millimeters. It says it's not watertight. So we can fix that. We can either Dynamesh it and make sure that it is completely nice and solid, or we could try to decimate, close holes again, depending on what it is. You never knew that analyst feature? Yeah, neither did I until like I said, like 6 months ago. And I was like, what? That's so awesome. Like I never used it before. Great to know. So usually closing holes makes it watertight. Yeah, usually closing holes and makes it watertight. There are some times it's not. And what we could do here is I'm going to turn off live boolean. What we can do in some instances when we get the feature that's not watertight, that's when I rely on Dynamesh. And I also just kind of like look over my model, make sure there's nothing obviously floating in weird positions, which in this case, it looks okay. So close holes and weld didn't work that time. So I'm going to use Decimation Master. The reason why I use that is because typically as high resolution as you can Dynamesh it, Dynamesh Master will then keep the majority of the details, and then you can project final details if need be. So I'm going to go to Dynamesh Master. It's a free plugin over at Pixologic.com. And I'm going to turn blur off, and I'm going to go ahead and set this to 3 million. That's pretty high, but it'll keep things pretty together. Let's hit Dynamesh. There we go. Now I still go through the process of hitting geometry, close holes, weld points, and now we can go to transform, analyze. It still says it's not watertight. That's okay. I'm pretty certain it is. We can actually test something, so let's do that. I'm going to delete that version. I'm going to show you how I test 3D prints for to see if there's any holes or something in the model that I'm missing, which can happen. And so to do that, let's actually save off, and then let's save a new version so I could just show you that feature. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to make sure that I delete this right there. Okay, final base. We don't need the keys anymore. The cube is good. Okay, perfect. So we have all this. Okay, let's actually go ahead and save this out as a new version. And I'll show you how I test, how I can like kind of test to see if there's any holes in the model. So I'm going to create a new cube, call this cube. Turn on transparency. I'm actually going to scale this cube up to engulf the model. So that way at the time I go all the way to the bottom, it's still within that model, okay? Now I'm going to bring this up so that it's above the model. I'm then going to go ahead and isolate everything except for, let's start with the body of the dragon. Now I'm going to go ahead and call this 3D print slice test. What sort of glue do you use? I actually just use simple Gorilla Glue gel. It's really effective. I've had it hold for years. So really good stuff. Okay, so now we're just testing to see if there's any holes within this body. So what we're going to do is actually turn this to cut, just like we did if we were making our keys, and we turn on live boolean. Now we're going to go ahead and just with the gizmo move it down. And this is the cool part. Check this out. As I'm doing this, I can actually see how the layer lines would look, and I can check for holes within my model. And this is how it would look if it was resin printing. Bloop, 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 just like that. Yeah, sometimes non-manifold geo will throw it, or stray polygon from Sculptress. Exactly right. Yeah, the transform analyze isn't 100% like guaranteed, but it's a great way of testing. And yeah, you're absolutely correct. It definitely can depend. So I'm actually going to turn the head on the dragon, and we're just going to do the same thing. And we're just going to kind of zoom in a little bit. And I don't really see any holes in the model. That's good. Let's Turn the head off. Let's go to the ship. This is probably what's gonna be. So you can kind of, yeah, those. Okay, so based on its size, I'm actually very curious. So this is where we could check to see wall thickness. Wall thickness is important when you're trying to print anything. Too small of a wall thickness, and sometimes it will actually, well, if it's too thin, it won't print. Or if it's too thin, you'll get a transparent look. So what we can do is while I have that cube in the position, I can come in here with the gizmo, the transpose tool. I can hover over this area and say like, okay, that's 0.1 millimeter. So for resin printing, that's actually not too thin, but it's pretty close. I've had that print before. That's kind of pushing it, you know what I mean? Like, I go for at least a 0.15 to 0.2 millimeter wall thickness for resin printing. If I need something really thin, that's 0.7. So that one little spot, this is what I was kind of concerned about. That's 0.18 millimeter. So I think that'll print. That should print. Again, it's a little thin, but that would do it. Hit Y again. Come here to the, where are we at? There we go. Loop. And the rest of it looks like it'd be okay. So, again, that's where you kind of make that decision on what works best for you. Turn that cube back on. Let's go, turn the ship off, I mean. And now we'll kind of check the base. Hey, Lewis, I still haven't learned how to maintain color and textures of my model when I want to make a change at the end. I have to make it all white or a single color. I noticed that you go back to your original color in an easy way. How do you do it? Oh, okay, yeah. Keep the color painted and go back even when the material has changed. To keep all the color, so if you look under your subtool, you see this little paintbrush that's here next to the eye? Get this paintbrush. Well, this paintbrush, if you have no poly paint on there, it actually defaults as off. And then when you start applying poly paint to your subtool, this automatically gets turned on. And so if you want to turn the color on and off, you go ahead and just click this, click the paintbrush, and that'll turn it on and off. If you want to turn, let's say you have multiple subtools on, so you want to turn all the color on or off, you just hold shift, hit the paintbrush, it'll turn it all off. Hit shift and hold it again, it'll turn it all on. So that's how you see me bouncing back and forth between the two. So with 3D printing, you know, when you start finalizing, you don't need the color on, obviously, but if you would like to see it, that's how you would do it. Hey, no problem, Lewis, no problem. All right, so let's check the base real quick. It's all about that base. Let's grab it. So yeah, I'm going to turn the color off. And now I'm going to go ahead and make sure, there we go, that this is coming out pretty well. So yeah, there's a little bit of funkiness right here. So that actually indicates that it's not a completely flat bottom. And okay, that's okay. So what we can do with this subtool, we can turn this off. I think what we can do for this is one of two things. We can actually go up to slice curve, which is, again, just another way of doing something that we can control a straight line. Something like that. I can then take this bottom, flip it, delete hidden, close holes, and that will give you a nice flat surface down at the bottom. And then, of course, if we make that too, if that happens to be just a little too, thin, we can just highlight that bottom, stretch it out, but that should be okay. Again, the geometry doesn't matter so much. That should be a nice flat bottom. We can double check it, of course. Bring that down. Boom, perfect. That's a lot better. There we go. All right, so we can turn that off. And now we're ready for the final step in prepping for 3D print, and that is decimating it and making sure that the model can then be exported out for 3D printing. So again, I'm gonna save this real fast. And now we're gonna go ahead and decimate. Now, I'm not gonna decimate on screen because decimation can take forever and it kind of just locks up, you know, it can like it locks up. You can't do anything else until it decimates. So I'm not going to decimate here. I have another model I would like to cut that I could show you guys my process a little bit more. But essentially what you would want to do at this point is go to Decimation Master. If you would like to keep the color for rendering purposes or for just because you like it, when you go to decimate, make sure you use and keep polypaint. Same if you have UVs. If your model has UVs and you want to bring that into another program that utilizes those, go ahead and select keep UVs and keep and use color. I don't have any UVs, no need. I would click use to keep polypaint. Usually I go about 20% decimation. And then after that, I go ahead and pre-process all. That takes a while, depending on the size of your file. And then when that's done, you hit decimate all, and that will do that. So I won't do it here just because it can take a while, and then you guys will just be watching me watch ZBrush, and that's no fun. So just to note that that's how you can do that. So again, Decimation Master, pre-process everything, decimate it, and then you check for errors, make sure that it wasn't nothing broke in that process, because that can happen sometimes. You take it too low, and then it breaks. And then what you'll do at the end is you'll go up to 3D Print Hub. Now let's say we want to export this. We're good, we're happy with it. Let's export because we're ready to ship it off to print. What you'll do is go back to that 1-inch cube. And this part is really important because, again, updating your size or setting your scale is dependent on that subtool. And that cube, if you remember, we set it to 25.4. This will ensure that the size stays consistent throughout your entire project. So I highlight the cube. I now go up to 3D Print Hub, and I type in Update Size Ratio. And that now selects that we have 25.4 millimeters, which is 1 inch, that is selected. So we say OK, and that confirms that that's the size that we want. We then export out to STL. Go ahead and say, folder, call it Dragon Print, whatever you want to call it. And then I say save. And now it's important to note that if you took the time and saved and named your subtools, the second choice will use the subtool name as what's in your ZBrush file. I usually do that, so I take the time to name here. So then I can go ahead and say, yep, export it out. That could take a minute. Once it's done and you're exported, I can then go to where I saved everything. So let's actually open up a folder real quick. I'm going to go ahead and locate that. And so here it says 1-inch folder, my 3D print slice test. That's the very first name of my subtool. Or no, that's the slice test, I'm sorry. Then I have final base, dragon body, dragon head, the final ship. And then, of course, the name of the file, which we could just delete that. And we don't need the print test either. And so now you could take that 1-inch cube, throw that in a slicer, and check its size. And if its size is good, then you know the rest of your models are good. And if not, you just go back in, re-update, and go from there. So hopefully that made sense for you guys. I'm going to get some water right now. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to load in a really cool file that I've been worked on it for a couple weeks. Really excited about it. And what I'm planning on doing with this, guys, is releasing this model for free in my Discord. So if you guys want to come hang out with artists, or talk to each other and pick each other's brain, share your projects, connect with others, keep it peaceful, of course, you can go ahead and take that link and go to my Discord. I'm going to be dropping this for free for everybody to 3D print for themselves. So if you guys are interested in having something kind of fun, to just print, I will make this will be available some point this week. I'll finalize it off stream because, again, that decimation process gets really tricky. So, and I'm going to create a final render for this because I think it's going to be fun. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Let's go ahead and save. And I'm going to load a file that I've been working, and then I'm going to cut this file up because we got about an hour left, a little over an hour left. And then, of course, too, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to comment down below, or if you're watching this after the stream, make sure to comment down below. And if you guys have questions now, please let me know. Okay, so this will be released sometime next week. Let's go ahead and let me show you the file I was really digging. So I'm gonna open it up and let's see. I think I have it here. Mortal Kombat characters. So this is a bit of fan art that I've been playing with, and we're gonna prep it for 3D print or see how far we can get. It's kind of a heavy file though. Okay, here you go. This is a personal project I decided to get ready for Mortal Kombat, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to fumble around and get this fixed up. So I'm really excited about this one. Ah, thanks, man. Thanks. Yeah, I've actually purposely not keyed this because I was thinking I might actually run out of my dragon and thought this would be kind of cool. I was going to make an attempt at that character soon. Oh, do it. I chose to do this character because it was my favorite character when the first Mortal Kombat game came out. And what's really cool about it is I like the original look. So I just kind of put my own spin on the character and how I perceived it to be. So, woo-woo! All right. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's start matching them up. I'm actually thinking it's going to be best to keep them in few pieces as possible and maybe scale them to, like, I don't know, maybe like 1/8. Maybe 1/8 scale would be kind of cool. Trying to think of a good size that could print overall. So Sub-Zero. And then I have the base itself, which is right here. So let's actually finalize the base a little. Oh, I have the base finalized. Okay. Yeah, so let's actually... So here's the base I have. Let's solo that out for a second. Perfect. And I'm thinking this this blood drip that I have, I'll actually put that and merge that with the base. So this folder here, let's get rid of that. Thank you guys, thanks. I'm glad you guys like it. Yeah, I thought this one was pretty cool. Okay. Okay, what I'm gonna do now... So I used, to get this blood effect, I actually used that splat brush, which I thought was really cool. So I'm gonna split hidden. And I'm gonna be merging all this together here. There we go. Let's turn Sub-Zero off for a second. Okay, and so we could see that this piece right here is actually no good. So I can either solo that out or mask it, and yeah, that's not gonna work. So let's actually just get rid of that. Just delete hidden. There we go. Super pumped to see the Sub-Zero printed. Oh yeah, no, I'm super excited too. All right, and let's go ahead and just call this base. I like to use folders, guys, when I'm merging things together because it doesn't always work the first few times you do it. So I'm gonna go ahead and just merge that folder. And then let's actually go to geometry, close holes, weld points. That should be okay. All right. So the base is good. Now I'm just going to go ahead and take Sub-Zero. Let's solo that out. No, perfect. Let's just hide that for a second. There we go. Okay, that's the other piece I needed. Let's bring that up. Perfect. Let's turn that on. Let's get rid of this first one and redo the merge. Let's go ahead and merge that folder. Okay, congratulations on your experience in ZBrush. It's a wonderful program. Passion indeed. For me, it's the best modeling texturing program. It was even more fantastic with the insertion of fabric dynamics and the other amazing brushes. I once made an observation that if there were rigid humanoid models, that we could change their muscles and characteristics and still remain with that rigging while being that we would update pardon me, as we change the proportions of the model. That is, could we make our own models with the pose we want besides altering their physical genomes? That would be the maximum of the program. Wow, that's a great and awesome question. And I know with blend shapes and stuff has gotten really big. But that kind of goes a little bit over my head. I do a lot more kind of old school brute force methods where I will T-pose it and then move it around. I started playing with some blend shape tests, but I got a lot to learn. But yeah, if yeah. That's what I got to say about that. I agree, yeah. That it would yeah, if that's something that, you know, that would be such an amazing feature, you know. But yeah, that goes a little bit over my head. Okay. All right, and let's just merge that real quick. Yeah, the beauty thing about ZBrush, and one thing I can say is that I've been in ZBrush for about 5 years, give or take. And every day I feel like I can learn something new and not at all like be disappointed or you know, it's like there's so much to it that I can just like focus in and learn something. Like I'm getting a little bit more done with array meshes because of just how powerful they are. So it's like yeah, there's so much here and I'm still excited to be learning myself. Okay. All right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go ahead and grab the Sub-Zero and we're gonna merge this whole folder together. And actually what I want to do is I did use dynamic subdivision at some point. So I'm gonna go to geometry, and what I'm gonna do is use the arrow key and look over my models and make sure that there is no dynamic subdivision happening. And I do just kind of want to shout out something real quick. If you guys are really interested in learning more in depth about hard surface, ZBrush has a series called How It's Made with Paul Gabry, and I believe he's doing it every Thursday. So if you guys are like really wanting to get a deep dive, that is definitely one to jump on, and I've been jumping on that one too myself. So just a little heads up if you guys want to get a little bit more technical. And then, of course, too, if you guys have any questions about that, let me know, and I could try to answer them as best I can. So we're going to merge the whole folder now. Yeah, Thursdays. Yeah, so far it's been Thursdays. But you guys can check the calendar too. I'm pretty sure it's Thursday. Let's actually take a look. Let's see. Let me quickly. Hello from India. How are you doing? Yeah, so if I'm going to go to the Pixologic calendar real quick, we could see. If you guys go to the ZBrush Live calendar, you can actually check to see who's going, and I think every Thursday. It's not here. Well, he usually tweets about it too, so keep an eye out for that. He did one with the espresso machine last Thursday. I followed along with it. It was fantastic. What time is it now? For me in Los Angeles, it is 7 p.m. Baseball cats and coffee making. Yep. Yeah, and it's been a great experience too. It's really like, I love taking it because fall is just amazing. All right. So right now, I don't know how the stream is going for you guys, but I duplicated my Sub-Zero who was at 60 million. I'm going to go ahead and delete that folder and resave it because that was 60 million and that was like 124 million. So that was way too much. It's 7:30 a.m. your time. Nice, nice. Well, good morning. Good morning, good morning. All right, I'm going to save this as, call this Sub-Zero 3D print pret. So this was pose. Now I'm going to go with print. And we're going to call this save 18. I love that he made an espresso maker and he doesn't even drink coffee. Nope. Yep. He does not drink coffee. I find that to be amazing. All right, there we go. I'm actually really surprised that the stream didn't crash. I was not paying attention to my poly count. Yeah, pardon me. I need some water. 1 second. Did not a hitch. I hate that he's so energetic. He doesn't even drink coffee. I know, right? Yeah, this is crazy. Okay. Okay, so this is about 64 million polys. And what we're going to do is actually kind of set this up for some success. I think we can actually... How do I want to approach this? 2 ways I would do this. I would actually try to dynamesh the whole thing and project details, but that might be a lot. I actually might get away with trying to decimate it down a little bit first. That might be a lot. I heard he eats PLA. Is it ZBrush is used for sculpting in Godzilla? Yeah, I believe they use ZBrush for that. Yeah, there was a video not too long ago. My favorite beverage is actually water. But I also drink amino acid. I love it. Yeah, ZBrush is used for Godzilla and a bunch of other stuff. Yep. Okay. So what we're gonna do is all of this is merged together. So I'm gonna go ahead and weld points, and then we're gonna make some custom keys. And I'm just gonna try to cut a few different things. I'm working with a high file, so we're gonna call this Sub-Zero cut. Now, we have a lot of this other stuff here that we've saved and done. Let's make sure we save this one more time. I've had a lot of experiences, so I save a lot. I'm going to save that, and because I'm working with a heavy file, whenever that happens, I'll go ahead and actually delete all, and then that will actually get rid of that section. I'll go ahead and hit delete all, delete everything in the subtool, and then of course. And I'm going to copy this key that I made a little while ago. I'm actually going to go ahead and paste that. You see, it's quite big. So we can actually grab this, scale this down. But we can repurpose this, which is nice. And then let's go in here and let's delete all. Get rid of that. Now we're working with just the Sub-Zero. And let's actually just throw this right... Where do I have that? Right there. ZBrush work drive. My work. Characters. 0. Post. And print. Sometimes my voice is glitching. Okay, that's good to know. My PC spec, yeah, I believe it's AMD 7, AMD Ryzen 7, and then 48 gigs of RAM, and then the RTX 2080 graphics card. It's pretty heavy file. Can actually try to like drop that down a little bit. Probably be best. Let's actually go ahead and do that. Let's solo this out. Okay. This part. So we're going to try to decimate this. Run it, man! Yeah, here's your Sub-Zero. Now planes are. Guess the movie. I don't even know. No idea. I'm bad at that game. Okay. So. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. I'm actually going to mark this time in history, because I think you can project history, right? Yeah, I've never done this before. Project history, yeah. I'm going to mark this time in history by holding Control and then tapping on that section, and it actually marks that time. You can undo it, or you can project that history. So you can work with the one subtool. I'm going to try something that's... I don't know. We'll see what happens. I like pushing things. So I'm going to go to Z plugin. I'm going to go to Dynamesh Master. And then I'm going to go ahead and call this 5 million. So it's a lot less than 64 million. And no blur. And I'm actually going to go ahead and hit Dynamesh. This might glitch for a little bit. So give me 1 second. Will you be printing your Vegeta action figure next week? I'm going to try. I have it set up to test print. Yes. Okay. Here we go. Might take a second. Kind of pushing it. This is that moment in which I know it's my fault if it gets glitchy. Hello, Carbon. What's happening? What's the difference between Dynamesh Master and Dynamesh Utility? To be honest, not much at all. Dynamesh Master just has a few extra features, but I never use them. He's excited. All right. You can see the blue bar up top. It's thinking. Oh, wow. Okay. Ooh. That was really good. That was really, really good. Actually worked out very, very well. Wow, yeah, that actually, oh, nice. Yeah. Woo! All right, I'm happy. There we go. So we went from 64 million to 5 million, 5.6. Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and save this now. Save. And then what I could do if I wanted to, I won't do it in stream right now because that is a stream killer. but you can then, with that history mark, project those details from history. So you go to project and project history, and then you can project that information back to, so you don't have to constantly duplicate and stuff. Why you can't start an individual YouTube channel? I actually do have a YouTube channel, and I've started to become a little bit more active on it. If you would like to go check that out, I try to drop small videos that are easily digestible that would help with certain ideas, like how to quickly create something or how to do a certain feature within ZBrush. So there is my link if you would like to check it out. It also has my Discord and my personal stream time on there as well. That needs to be a video of me. MK 2021. I am Sub-Zero, Running Man 1987. Now playing Zero. Should do a tete-a-tete on what you just did. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. I will do that then. Noted. All right. Yeah, I just really started becoming more active with my YouTube channel. I do stream there along with, I stream on Twitch on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to noon Pacific Standard Time. Or Pacific Daylight Time now, whichever one it is. Those always confuse me. So you can catch me there too. But yeah, I'm doing more tutorials, and I have a few there, so let me know what you guys think of that. If you don't mind giving me a sub, I would appreciate it. All right. Now let's take some keys, and let's size this guy. That's what we want to do. And actually, let's see here. This is only 1 million. This isn't that bad. So what I'm going to do is actually, for this one, I'm going to control-click on the timeline to mark that in history. And I'm going to go ahead and actually Dynamesh this at, say, 1 million. Now let's go to, let's just Dynamesh it together because we merged it all together. And right now there's different poly groups. So I want to merge that officially. So we're going to go ahead and Dynamesh this. We're not going to change the information per se. We're just making sure it's welded together as best as it can be. Make a smile quickly. Speed sculpt, go. Well, we're going to be doing a lot of stuff with ZBrush Core Mini starting next week. So if you guys are excited about that and want to follow along, we'll make a smiley face and a bunch of stuff. Ooh. Maybe I'll make a Slimer. I haven't sculpted a Slimer in such a long time. That could be fun. Okay. Now we got that. Let's start making some keys. So let's go ahead and save this. And now, let's start prepping where we want these. So this custom key is super awesome. We're going to go ahead and actually just put the 0 at thickness because we are not necessarily setting up the thickness just yet. I just kind of want to quickly place where I'm going to want these keys to be. And I don't think I'm going to be creating a lot of custom shape keys. I think I'm going to keep this generic as possible. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'll play with a different cutter later. But with here, we kind of have some, you know, we have his gloves and stuff, so we can actually use that as cutting points, which is really cool. So we can come in and set up where these keys are going to be. And that can help us hide some of these seams. Something like that would do a pretty good job, actually, of hiding that seam. Can you teach the basics of ZBrush Core Mini by putting some tutorials? Oh, yeah. If you guys are interested in that, I would definitely do some recording on that for sure. Absolutely. Hey, what's going on, my Keesies? Welcome in, welcome in. Okay. Now I'm actually going to go ahead and Control-Shift-D, which will duplicate my cutter. And I'm going to go ahead and move this one around. So after we place our keys, we'll go over some scaling, and then, so just like we did before. Now here's the thing. So what we can do as well, as a for instance, I'm going to scale this down a little bit more, get this in there. Let's say, for example, we don't want this like this, but we do want the key to be straight. You can, because this is a plane, manipulate that plane so that it could be as close to perfect as possible that you want. So I could come around and actually take this area right here, mask that, soften it up, and actually move this down to where I want it to be. So I can actually manipulate these a little bit. So I can kind of arc this around, kind of bring that there a little bit. So it doesn't have to be a straight cut, you know? And let's say this was actually hitting the spine. I can then actually take this section right here, grab this, either get rid of that completely, say something like that, and actually trim some of that edge off. As long as it's going completely through my model, it'll be totally fine. It's up to you. Let's see here. What kinds of stuff do I have on my Patreon? I pretty much have a library of stuff on my Patreon. I have my Darth... Do I have my Darth Grogu on there? I got my Gwenum on there. One of my favorite models is this one right here, which is Chun-Li versus Vega. What I do is I drop one model every month on my Patreon. And so I have a few other things on there too. My plan is to put the Vegeta Articulated on there, and then this Mortal Kombat one in there as well. What's the thing on your arm you just made? Oh, this thing right here is actually the... this is the cutter that we're going to be doing for cutting this for 3D printing. Hey Ian, how did you decide which joint that you want to cut for 3D printing? Great question, actually. For statue work, the joints for cutting, it just kind of depends on what fits the need of the model. I tend to look for... here, I'm going to solo this out. I tend to look for flat lines that I can hide the cut. So if there's a glove or something, that kind of makes it a lot easier to decide. I take a look at the model and I ask myself, how can I make the cut without compromising the detail of the model? Now with articulation, that's a lot harder to make assessment because articulation basically destroys the look of the model. That's kind of more of like, you have to try to preserve as much of the model as possible. So I'll use tools like ZBrush to kind of help me with that. So for standard statue work, try to just find the best, cleanest line to hide the cut. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's a little impossible, so you make custom cuts. Like for an arm example, you would, you know, kind of cut around the bicep and stuff. And I can get into that more if you guys would like. It's a little bit more in depth. And then sometimes you just use a plane like what I got going on here to cut the model. So cutting a model is custom. It's just kind of figuring out how to keep the appeal and aesthetics of the model, but still make the cuts so that it's easy to manufacture. Also, too, if you're dealing with heavy manufacturing, you have to account for overhangs, undercuts, those sort of stuff, which makes it more difficult to do. So, for example, this part right here, I designed it for 3D printing, not for production. So there's a lot of edges here that would just hang up in the process. So you have to kind of have your manufacturing process ideal set up to make those decisions. For standard 3D printing, it's just all about trying to hide the cuts as much as possible. So hopefully that makes sense. I don't want to try to be really winded, but like, for example, let's say I wanted to custom cut this arm. I could actually come here. Let's grab this as an example. But actually kind of mask off this area right here. And actually come in and kind of try to find the seam line that made the most sense. I'm not going to cut this way because I want to keep it as simple as possible, but what I would do is kind of, you know, kind of maybe mask this area off. I don't know why it's being difficult. There we go. So like I'd mask this section off, make this arm one poly group, and then split that off and then create. That could be a bit technical. Hello, Miklo. Welcome in, welcome in. Hey, Genesis. So, this is the Pixologic stream. They are the creators of ZBrush. So, yeah. If you have any ZBrush related questions, let me know. But, you know, Blender's a different company. Do I know Python? I tried to learn Python a couple of years ago and did not succeed very well. Okay, so let's go back to placing. I'm thinking about just making this as simple as possible. Maybe I'll leave his head. Maybe I'll cut his head. I'll probably cut his legs. So let's actually do that real quick. Let's create this one. Control-Shift-D duplicates. No, you're totally fine. Don't even worry about it. And again here, so I'm looking for how do I want to cut his leg? And where I am going to cut it is right where the boots intersect with his leg. And see, I can come in here and say, like, this is probably the best place to make that cut. And then what I can do, like I said before, I can mask off an area like this, kind of soften that a little bit. And then I can just pull that down a little bit. There you go. Maybe rotate it a little bit. Bring it down. And just make that like that. So that's the cool thing about doing planes. We can take the move brush. And we can... Let's see, do I have move? Oh, you know what? Let me check something. Sometimes if you go to samples, you have projection on. There we go. Okay. Just gonna take snake hook brush. Is that not moving? Okay. Let's actually grab that section like that. Soften that up a little bit. We'll just move it with a gizmo. Like such. There we go. And so, see, now we can have a custom spot. And we can finagle that as much as we want. Now, let's see here. I feel like this needs a hidden pizza box somewhere else. Maybe hidden in the cut. Very nice. There you go. How do you make those areas on the blue armor in Alpha Brush? Oh, great question. Actually, I use nanomesh for that. So, I'll show you on this cylinder right here. So, great question. So, I'm gonna go ahead and make Polymesh 3D, and what I'm gonna do is we're going to want to apply material or a pattern to our material. So let's say we have our cylinder and we just want to apply to the outer surface. We don't want to apply on top. So what we're going to do is we're going to load up Z Modeler Brush. So BZN. And what I'm going to do is go to QMesh, Polygroup All. And then I'm going to start dragging this side here. Actually, no, before we do that, let's actually go to Polygroups. You're down here. And we're going to go to Group by Normals because we want just to isolate the center part. So Group by Normals will give us this. And now we can grab this, hold Control. We can actually pull a piece off of the cylinder, something like that. And I can isolate that and split hidden. Now I'm working within this realm. And I'm going to bring that back down to close to size, something like this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to geometry. We're going to go to dynamic subdivision, and we're going to turn that on. So now it's kind of like smoothing that a little bit. Or you just hit D on the keyboard to turn it on, Shift D to turn it off. Now we're going to go to this feature called Micro Poly. We're going to turn that on, and that's going to give us some options. Or you can click in here. And what I do is I actually pick bumps, and it gave me this. So, let's see here real quick. My shift key is not working, therefore, now I'm using the shift key in the touch screen keyboard for sculpting. If your shift key doesn't work, you can start playing with the redemption hours. Oh no. Yeah. Yeah, no problem. And then, of course, too, what you could do is once you like this, you can actually come here and scale it down or boost it up, depending on what you would like to do. You then can, once you hit D or Shift D, you could turn off dynamics. You can see it's only displaying that. Hit D again, dynamics with micro polyon. It shows off all this detail, but it's not official. In order to make it official, we just go up to dynamic subdivision and hit apply. Now that's real geometry. So I'm going to back it up for a second. So if you go up to your active points, the original cube, what we got here, the cylinder, is 480. And when we turn dynamic on, you can see here, even though it's displaying, it is still 480. So that's why you got to make sure to hit apply. And now we're at 2,272. So make sure when you use Micro Poly to then go ahead and apply the dynamic subdivision. And then you can always hit close holes if you want to kind of cap it. And now you have this. And so you have a rolling pin. No, not a problem. Yeah. I like using Micro Poly over using Nanomesh, but each has its own properties. One doesn't replace the other, but that's definitely a really quick way to get something on there. And so with Sub-Zero, I just like that bump texture so much that I just bloop, plopped it on. Okay. We're going to go ahead and Control Shift D once more. Okay, cool. Big problem is a poly count limit, but end up with 2 million polys. Yeah. Watch the poly count when you do that. Usually what I'll do is I had it for Sub-Zero. I had all of this texture dynamically displaying, but not actually geometry until I was ready to bake it. And so that's why I went through before merging everything together and made sure that dynamic subdivisions was all applied. Does ZBrush have a node-based system for texturing? I do not think so. No, not that I'm aware of. But you can always reach out to Pixologic.com or just ask ZBrush and verify. But I'm pretty sure it doesn't. It does have a texturing. It does have a texture area, but that's really just to make maps and export. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of set this up where I think it would cut nicely. Again, we're just trying to hide the cuts as much as possible. And I think that would be good. You know, cut the hands off, cut the feet off. The rest can 3D print, resin. Yeah, I'm not really too concerned. I think that would be good. That's a good chunk of pieces. I mean, I can do one more, maybe cut. Yeah, let's do one more. I say that, and then let's do one more. But what we can do is actually Control-Shift-D, duplicates. What we'll do is we'll actually cut his waist. Cut his waist up. And I'll show you how you can manipulate these planes so that you're not interfering with each other. Finish him. Alright. We could probably even just cut like somewhere in here and be okay. Now, what we want to make sure is that, see how it's cutting into the blood there? So what we're going to want to do now is actually highlight this section and maybe bring this in straight across. So that way it's not touching that area at all, but it still cuts through, which, yeah, that's pretty cool. That'll work. It's not touching anything else. That's imperative. Although we can just make sure that we highlight this section here and maybe bring that in just a little bit, little bits. There we go. Have I done any motion graphics projects? I have not, no. Finish him has so many meanings here. Yeah. Are you gonna slice the neck too? Actually, I think I might leave the neck and head on there. I might. One of the things that, even though resin printers are so amazingly detailed these days, and they give you so much freedom, I try not to have super small prints in there. I try to keep things, also too, because I drop stuff all the time. So I feel like that might be a good cut right there. You can kind of hide it in the belt a little bit. Yeah, I think that'll be okay. At the end of the day, I think that'll be okay. All right. Yeah, let's go ahead and leave that. Let's go ahead and save. And now we'll start prepping our size. Okay. So what we're going to do, I'm going to show you guys another way to size your model. And so you know how I created the 1-inch cube? Well, what I'm going to do is actually do a bounding box to the character instead of the 1-inch cube. This way I can size from head to toe how tall he's going to be, and then the rest of the model will follow. Okay, so just like kind of another way of doing it if you give you variety. So I'm going to insert that cube that I love so much, turn on transparency, and I'm just going to scale it up to about head to feet. Just something like that. So not the whole model, unless you want to do the whole model, then you can. But I want to scale him pretty decently. So I think I would like him to be, maybe like 6 inches tall. We'll call that. Yeah, let's just say that. So we're going to do this. We'll just call this 6-inch. Should be fine. I'm going to save this real quick. Hey, Gaming Mana. How you doing? Sorry for the caps. No worries. It happens to me all the time. I always get caps locks turned on. ZBrushing all day long, man. Happens. Okay. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to pull up the infamous computer calculator. So 25.4 times 6 will give me 152.4 millimeters. It's perfect. I'll take it. So I'm going to size this cube to that size. So I'm going to go to Z plugin. I'm going to go to, let's save it one more time. I've had it corrupt the file. It has happened. So let's go. Scale master. I'm going to go ahead and set scene scale. It's going to set it to whatever it thinks. So it's currently thinking it's 4.75 millimeter. It's perfect. Now I'm going to resize this to a 152 millimeter cube. I'm going to go ahead and hit resize subtool. Yep, we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And we're going to let it do its magic. And we're rescaling not only to control the size, but to also control our cuts. Let's go ahead and turn off this cube for a second, because I want to make sure my model didn't get warped in any way. And nope, that looks pretty good. I dig it. All right. Still got a lot of good detail. Nice. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our cutters. You could do one of two things. You can make it all one subtool, And then you can auto group it if you would like to have different polygroups, or you can have them all individually. I like to kind of merge them together. So that way I'm just using, it's like cutting one subtool to one subtool instead of one subtool to 5. Just kind of like a hierarchy system. I'm gonna go to polygroups and hit auto groups. And now I'm gonna go ahead and turn on live Boolean. And we're going to go ahead and click that negative button, which will then set our cuts. And we can see we have a lot of stuff happening here. And this is where we need to make some adjustments. So let's actually grab this guy. Solo this out, which is perfect. So again, when you're cutting for 3D print, a lot of times it's a little bit of a consuming process. It could take time for sure. Use transparency as your friend to basically then scale down or scale your model up in order to get the right key size and make sure that the wall thickness is nice and clean. But with these planes, we're able to make the male and female cuts consistently each time. Did you just use a calculator? That's like a highlight. Yes, yeah, I did. I use it all the time. It's my best friend. Turn off live Boolean for a second. I'm just going through each and every one. I'm making sure that the wall thickness, so you can see here how this plane is too close to this. You can see how this plane is too close to the wall. So what I'm going to do is Alt tap the gizmo to a certain spot. And then I'm going to have transparency on, and we're just going to kind of reposition this as we need it. There we go. Make sure it's not too close to that wall. Kind of move things up where we need them to be. So again, these planes, they don't have to be straight. They just have to cut clean across. But you can have a little bit of flex in these, so you can, as long as you don't create an overhang, you should be fine. But I definitely do this a lot where I'll kind of move it in position so that way I get a nice, clean, seamless cut as much as possible. We are prepping to cut this up for 3D prints. And we're just kind of going over everything. Right now, I've made single poly planes that we're going to use for, whoops, not flip, use for cutting the male and female keys in our joint. Sub-Zero look cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So it's 7:37 right now. Do you guys have any other 3D printing related questions, ZBrush related questions that you would like to know? Definitely hit me up. We're going to go until 8, so we got about 25 minutes-ish, give or take. I use the calculator, but my math is math. Okay. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Sorry, I just got here. What is the draft angle of the keys? I just started with a single plane, and then I just scaled it down visually. I didn't really get into any type of crazy mathematical features. I just grabbed the edge, turn around, and just scaled down as I saw fit. The real goal is just to keep them angled, and then this started with a flat plane that I'm actually using to... It's a single sided plane that I'm using to then kind of manipulate and get it so that I can get a seamless cut as much as possible. But typically I would say if you want a decent taper, 5-10 degree angle, that should be more than enough. You just don't want a straight key. You just want a little bit of an angle to it because you want that key to slide right in. With flat square peg keys, they have a tendency, if they don't print right, to hang up on the edges. So even the smallest taper should be really good. Okay. All right. The other thing we're going to do, set scene scale on this cube. I forgot to do that. That's going to make sure that we are correct where we want. And now we're going to go ahead and we're actually going to apply a thickness now. So again, what we want to do with this thickness, we're going to solo this out. We're going to go to geometry, dynamic subdiv, and then we're going to just apply a thickness. And I'm going to go 0.0. Let's go 0.001. Let's see what that is. We can actually measure that. Because now that we have a good size indicator, we can zoom in on the key, hit W for the gizmo, hit Y for the transpose tool, and we can actually measure this thickness now. So we can come here to this point, and that's going to be 0.2289 millimeters. That's actually a pretty decent cut. So remember how I said at the beginning, if you were with us, that your thickness might change depending on your viewpoint and your measurements. So here I took a cube and made it 6 inches, so then I can keep the character within the bounding box for head to toe scale. Now that my thickness is not a solid number, it's now 0.001 thickness, which is perfect. That will work out for what we want. So then when I turn on live Boolean, I can actually get that cut. And that will be pretty good. That should work out. And because we're dealing with live Boolean, we can actually manipulate this file and get them cleaned up a little bit. Let's actually touch right there. Let's see here. Sorry, just let's see. Hey Ian, do you have any suggestions of 3D printer for a newbie? I actually recommend that really just work within your budget, but there are so many 3D printers that are available that are affordable. For somebody who's getting into 3D printing, I usually recommend an FDM printer like an Ender 3 or something, because it's friendly, it's easy to learn, and there's a lot of things within it. You can print big and you can have fun with it. Resin printing, I usually don't recommend for somebody who's starting out, but if you want to get into it as somebody who's starting out, just know that there's a good cleaning process that you'll need to follow. UV lights, isopropyl alcohol, or some sort of cleaning agent. So really research what you would need. While resin printing is, in my opinion, easier to set up and easier to get going, there's a lot of just kind of know-how in and getting a lot of that safety feature. So where FDM, you can buy it, assemble it, and start printing, and most people print in PLA, so it's actually pretty easy. But you know, if you understand the safety protocols of resin, just proceed with caution. That's all I recommend. But definitely Ender 3 is a great printer. And then if you're going to go resin, I definitely recommend doing something like the Elgu Mars. They're usually really affordable and very, very sturdy machines. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and readjust this bottom part here. There we go, that should be fine. Again, checking wall thickness. You can even just scale this one down in particular just a little bit more. That's a beauty part too. When you're working with dynamic subdivision, once you set the thickness, if you don't apply it right away and you decide to scale down, that thickness stays the same. So really make sure to kind of don't apply your key thickness until you're absolutely ready. And kind of just take a look. That should be fine. I like that. That's not too bad. Center looks pretty good. Legs look pretty good. Beautiful. Let's get confident. Let's save and let's just see what happens. So we're going to go ahead and go up to our little gear icon on the folder, and we're going to go ahead and Boolean folder. All right, so we got an error, meaning things were not merged together properly. Happens all the time. So let's actually go ahead and factor that out. So let's delete that. When it errors out and you have things in a folder, it just duplicates those models and then kicks them out of the folder. So I'm deleting the stuff that got kicked out. We're going to go to the Sub-Zero. We're going to go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Close Holes. Oh, yeah. Weld Points. Close holes one more time just in case. Let's go ahead and give that a shot. We did Dynamesh it, so there might be things that it kind of missed in the Dynamesh. Well, let's go ahead and try that one more time. Oh, you know what? I realized I didn't apply my thickness. That's actually part of it. So let's go here. Let's hit apply. See? There you go. Let's try it one more time. Bullying that. There we go. There we go. All right, this is actually taking a lot longer, so hopefully that means that we did a better job. And, okay, the color got funky, but not the sculpt. So that was cool. That's okay. So I don't know why the color got funky, but I already got a pretty cool render out of it. Let's actually go to stroke. I mean, not to, let's go to render, preview AO. Let's turn on. That way we can see a little bit more of the detail. Yeah, that's looking pretty cool. All right, let's see if we did it right. So you can see it's all one poly group. If it cut correctly, we can go to poly groups and hit auto groups, and we should get different colors, which we do, which is perfect. Except right here. Oh no, that did cut. Okay, great. That cut. Perfect. It's just too similar of a color. Perfect. Thank you so much, Lit Penguin. How you doing? I think the error might be because it has to be boolean with subdiv since the cuts were dynamic. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I hit the wrong one. I agree, it's definitely badass. Thanks so much. All right, so now we have these separate pieces. We can go ahead and grab this, split hidden. And now we can create all this stuff, split hidden. And now we can just, there we go. Now with the feet, before I split hidden, what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna duplicate the feet. Let's rename this. So let's do, this is the skull part. And then let's do this one. Let's rename this torso. We'll come here to his right hand. So right. And this one is going to be his legs. And then with this one, now that I duplicated it, I'm actually going to split hidden on this one. This will be his right foot. And then this one will be his left foot, renamed left. I don't know why I spelled that one. Foot. There we go. And now we can actually go ahead and delete the folder that Sub-Zero was in. And then we could save this as another iteration, which I do quite often. Always have something to go back to. Doing great. Love your work, brother. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Awesome, awesome. All right, now what we can do, so we have this feet, we're gonna call this feet cut. And the space that we have, so we have this one right here, which is what we want. This folder, we can get rid of that guy. And we'll call this base cut. Perfect. And now with this feet, we can drag that in there. Turn everything else off. We have this. And like we did before, ooh, look at that, guys. I was a little too close to the wall right there. See that? So I'll probably want to go back and fix that, but running out of time, so that's okay. Yeah, that's a little too small. So I'll actually go back and fix that. For your personal channel, you document your process for the supports and printing and putting it together, sanding, etc. I have thought about it, yeah. I've thought about streaming how I do supports, but I'm not set up for the print and paint and sanding process. So, hey, Spicer's here. Hello, Spicer. Shout out to that guy. Everybody here, you guys know who Spicer is, right? And if you don't, click on his name because he streams here too. Sorry, that totally took my thought away. So yeah, so I'm not 100% set up on how to do that on my own personal streams yet, but I have another camera and I'm contemplating a few setups. So it's no for now, but only because I'm not set up to, but I want to get to that point. Okay, you know what? We can go a couple minutes over. So I don't think anybody else is streaming after me. Let me double check. I think I'm the last on Sundays. Let me just double check. Don't assume anything. Let's see here. Calendar. Today is Sunday, and I am the only one on there. Cool. So, yep, next one is tomorrow with Shane Olsen, which you guys have to stop by. Cool. So we can go a couple minutes over. Let me fix that. So let me load the previous model real quick. And let's fix that key cut, because it is not good. So let's fix it. So they're just a little too... they're just a little too tight. So let's shrink that down. Yeah, I would love to see the whole process. Okay, yeah. Maybe I'll try to find a way to document my process and then record it for at least a YouTube video. And then if I can set it up for a decent stream, I will. Okay. We'll scale this one down a little bit. Yeah, see, that's just too close to the wall. So something to remember too, once you get it too close to that wall, that's when you can have holes and all sorts of problems. So you just want to make sure that it's right on. There we go. And for this one, let's actually just delete all. Go back here. There we go. Apply my subdiv, and then go ahead. Wait, let's try this one more time. Let's make sure. I don't know if I saved it before or after. Let's go ahead and close holes. Weld points. Okay, close holes one more time for good luck. And Boolean folder. Yeah, we know the Dojo Master well. His presence is most welcome. Absolutely. Maybe a time lapse. Yeah, actually, that's all great. I'm gonna note that down. You know, because yeah, that's awesome. You guys want to see it. It's a spasa. Okay. Hey, the color actually did well that time. Did it? Nope, not that time. Doesn't matter. We don't need no color. Okay. Now we can go ahead and auto group that. There we go. Get that bad boy a different color. So there we go. We can actually, too, if you want to check before you split everything, with your subtool, hold Shift D when they're separate subtools. And that will actually, let's actually go through that process. Come here. Let's actually split everything off. Split hidden. Split hidden. Go ahead and duplicate that. Split hidden. Okay, we can hit Shift X, not Shift D, and that we can actually go in and check to make sure that the wall thickness is pretty good. Yeah. So we're just looking at how it cuts. Yeah, not too bad. It's looking pretty good. Shift X one more time. We'll actually lock that in. And there we go. Much better this time. What is the key combo to duplicate a subtool? It is Shift, Control, Control Shift, and then D will duplicate a subtool. What do I use for sculpting on like a... What do I use for sculpting an iPad? Like I'm going to sculpt it? I would use ZBrush. Control Shift D. Yep. Yeah, just Z Modeler and you can make it. I don't own an iPad, so I don't sculpt on one. Okay. We can go ahead and save this one more time. Let's actually save that change, and then let's come in here and delete the folders we don't need. Which I don't need this folder. I got that one. Now with this duplicate of the feet, I'm actually going to turn everything off but the base and that foot. And we'll call this a base cut. Bring the feet on in. And then let's actually save it now as a new version, and then we'll use these feet to cut out of the base. You know, rocks the thanks, man. I appreciate it. No problem. Okay, so now that we have this, we're going to take those feet. We're going to go ahead and hit subtract, which will then kind of, with live boolean, cut a little bit of space. Which is pretty cool. We're going to go ahead, go down to deformation, and we're going to give it a little bit of an inflate. So we're going to say maybe, let's try 2%. No, that sounds like a lot. Let's try 1%. There we go. Yeah, that's better. 1% is a lot better. Actually, debatable. Let's go deformation. Let's try 1 more percent. So we go 1. There we go. Just give us enough space. It's snow. Yeah, that might be a little bit better. Cool. There we go. Just give us a little something for our feet to be in. And then let's actually make sure that these shoes are closed, because sometimes when you cut with booleans, it could be, you could have to re-weld points and close holes. So just, it's a habit I've gotten into, and it works well for me. And then we're going to go ahead and boolean. Give that a minute. All right. There it is. It made its cut. It's looking pretty good. Now, you might see some little floating bits floating around like that. If you ever see little bits floating around, what you do is go to deformation, not deformation, sorry, you go to auto groups. So make sure you go to polygroups, auto groups, and then you can actually click the select rec, isolate the auto group or the group you want to keep, in this case the big one, and you can see sometimes you get these little particles that are floating around. Just go ahead and delete hidden, which is geometry, modify topology, delete hidden, and that will get rid of those little bits, and then close holes and weld points. And now we are here. Let's go ahead and save it. Exactly. Now we're going to go ahead and delete the folder now that I don't need that anymore. I'm going to turn everything else on except for what we need. And now you can see that we have this sliced up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces, including the base. Something like this, I'd probably print the base via FDM, or, I mean, resin would be pretty cool. Depends. I want to try to keep the base as one solid piece, just because it's so aesthetically pleasing, so I think that'll be okay. And then from here, we would actually turn around and start decimating it. And I'm just curious. So what I like to do too, for me personally, anything that is under 500,000 points for 3D printing is more than acceptable. It's still a little heavy. Ideally, 250,000 per subtool for 3D printing is ideal because most slicers can handle that with no problem. But let's actually decimate this down, and I'll show you a way you can do it where it makes it a little faster. So let's rename this. Now this is the left hand. Just rename real fast. Torso. Get those lines out the way. Rename this left hand. Ever feel like you can't type sometimes? That'd be me today. I'll call this legs. This is his... yeah, his left foot. And this is his right foot. Again, I try to name this as much as possible, and then I call this the base. Okay. Let's go ahead and save this. And now what I like to do, if you want to kind of like decimate in a hurry, and you don't want to pre-process too much, what you can do is go to Decimation Master, and down here at the bottom are preset numbers. And this 250K is really solid. It's really good. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll turn on the frame, and then I'll just go ahead and hit this button, and this does it really fast. A lot faster than pre-processing everything. If you just kind of like want to crunch it down quickly and you don't really care about it pre-processing, this is a good way to do that. And then you can take a look, and it preserves really, really well. You can see here, there's not a whole lot of detail loss. That's not too bad. Anybody want to teach me the basics of ZBrush? I've had it for a while, just never use it. Goblin Hero, ask me anything. I will help you out as much as I can, because you're right here. And so we're just going to go through, and you can see the geo before, how it's dynameshed and stuff. Go ahead and hit that 250, let it go. So we're going to go 1.9 mil. Now this doesn't work for everything, because it's all trying to take it down to that 250,000, but it does a great job preserving some details. So it's a good way to kick down that number quickly and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, then you just back it up, and then you try to pre-process a higher percentage, maybe something like 30%, which will help you take it down. And then once it's taken down, you then sometimes can decimate further and still protect details. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, ask away. I love teaching. When I'm not here teaching ZBrush, I'm on my own personal channel teaching ZBrush, and I also post YouTube videos, or have started getting into that more. But yeah, feel free to check out, like Comics Legend just posted. Go ahead, feel free to go to Pixologic.com. Go to YouTube and type in as ZBrush. You can look at a lot of past streams. If you're not here commenting live, then you can definitely leave a comment on any of the VODs, and somebody from Pixologic will reach out and answer your questions. So, okay. And see that, there we go. And we just end up doing it. This one's already set at 211, so I'm going to leave that. The legs are 1.5 mil, so I'm going to go ahead and hit that button. I will be printing this on mixed media. I'll be printing this on the Ender 3 for the base, and for resin, I'll be using my Epax X1, which is the equivalent of an Elgu Mars. Awesome, we'll do that. Help a lot. Yeah, not a problem. Please, yeah, stop by anytime. All right, we got... I'm going over just a couple minutes. Just kind of want to pre-process this. If you guys have any last questions about 3D printing, about cutting toys, about ZBrush in general, let me know real quick, because we're going to be taking off here in a minute. All right. And see here that decimation, it just holds so much detail so nicely. That's 370. That's totally fine. 369, that's fine. All right, this is 2 million. This is the big one. Go ahead and save it real quick. And we'll go ahead and hit that. This one might actually crack under pressure. What is ice? So just kidding. That was terrible. Thanks a ton for the stream, man. Thanks so much, Alden. I appreciate it. Are you on your personal stream tomorrow? Not tomorrow. No, Mondays and Thursdays I usually don't stream. No, yes. Monday and Thursdays I don't stream on my own personal channel because if I have client work or if I'm trying to get more YouTube videos out. So those are my recording days. But join my Discord if you guys would like to reach out more directly to not only me, but a bunch of other artists that follow. But my name is Ian, aka IR Sculpts. That's what my channel is. Go check that out. There is a link for you. I have to head off. Work in the morning. That's great. Take care. Thank you so much, Witch Cat Crow. Let's see. Do you feel you have issues when you print your pieces? Like, I want to get to the point where I don't need to sand the pegs. They just fit nice right out the gate. Actually, yes. These, I used to have issues, and it came down to tolerance. So please rewatch this video, because I went over scaling and tolerance and how to do that. But when you get to a point, and I'll go big screen for this, because I really want you guys to see it. My fun example is actually this Chun-Li versus Vega fan art that I did from the Street Fighter 2 movie. It was just like a little fun piece. I had to do it. The Chun-Li is attached to her face, or to Vega's face, and this pops right off. So it might be a little hard to see, but there's the key. And I've set it up with making that 1-inch cube in the beginning of this video and scaling and checking tolerance. You can ensure that when you slide them in, they just slide in. Now this one is only not glued because of its position and the way gravity is holding it in place. Everything else, there's about 20 pieces here all glued together. Like Chun-Li is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Chun-Li's about 6, 7 pieces. Vega is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 pieces for Vega. So this big old piece right here is about almost 20 pieces, including this. So go back, watch that. Feel free to ask me any questions, like I said, in my Discord, or definitely if you're watching this after the stream. So anybody who's watching this after the stream, if you hung out this long, thank you so much. But comment down below if you have any questions, or you need anything kind of answered in the comment section. And then if I don't see it, because sometimes I'll come back and check, somebody from Pixologic will, and they'll answer your questions as much as possible. So guys, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. This actually was perfect. There we go. Yay! All right, there it is. There he is. So in total, this is now from 64 million to 1.9 million points. So we're going to go ahead and save that, and then we'll export. Thanks a lot. Super helpful stream. Thanks, Ian. Happy Easter. Happy Easter to you guys. Thank you so much. And don't forget, next Sunday, I'm sculpting with ZBrush Core Mini. So please go download ZBrush Core Mini. Follow along. We're going to go over the basics of it. And we're going to create something for 3D printing. And you guys can either follow along with me. I'll do like a fun, cute little concept that I think everybody can follow along to. And then please ask those questions. We'll be doing that next Sunday. And then, of course, check out my links. Let me know what you guys think. If you have video ideas, hit me up. I'm Ian. Thank you so much, aka IR Sculpts. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. I had so much fun tonight. And I will see you guys next Sunday. All right, guys. That is it. Talk to you guys later. Subscribe!